Hey YouTube, we got another Cirucci team brief here for you. Today is July 19th, 2019. It's me, George, and Johnny with you this morning. We're just going to go right into it. We're going to just quickly just to touch into the Jeffrey Epstein. What we called on the show a couple weeks ago is coming to fruition right now in the quote-unquote alternative media. But I'll link this in the chat for this show. But there was a video put up yesterday by Russia Today, our RT America, titled "Why Epstein is Being Called a Foreign Agent." And this video already has 177,000 views. So that shows to me that YouTube is, I think they're going to be promoting this with an algorithm as well. But the whole, it's about the 4 minute mark. From the 4 minute mark on to it's a 14-minute video. It's all about how Epstein is just an agent of Mossad and an agent of Israel. And that's what we said. We called on this, right on this platform that the media is going to turn this Jeffrey Epstein case into a psyop about Zionist control and power in America. And it's the ultimate subterfuge for Roman Catholic power and control. Like this Russia Today segment had made no mention of Jeffrey Epstein's charity in the Virgin Islands. They even said that Epstein had a very fishy hedge fund in the Virgin Islands, and they're wondering where the money came from. Like Epstein was donating critical funds to the Catholic Church in the Virgin Islands. The Catholic Church is the most ancient, richest corporation on the planet. And also, they did no mention of Epstein's photo, the photo that the police seized at Epstein's house of him with the unnamed Pope. No mention of that on RT, but they had this guy on called Philip Giraldi, or they quoted Giraldi. He's a former CIA counterterrorism specialist. And this Philip Giraldi, his last name Giraldi makes me think he's a Catholic, but this Philip Giraldi he's a literal Holocaust denier. Russia Today is having a Holocaust denier onto their show to just muddy the waters about Epstein. And he says that they quote Philip Giraldi saying, Mossad would have exploited Epstein's contacts, arranging their cooperation by having Epstein wining and dining them while flying them off to exotic locations, providing them with women and entertainment. If they refused to cooperate, it would be time for blackmail photos and videos of the sex with underage women. End quote. That's the quote from Philip Giraldi. And, the best lies do run somewhat parallel to the truth. And, Epstein probably was, blackmailing people, but he's not blackmailing people for Mossad. He's blackmailing people for the Vatican power apparatus. And that's why, that's why we see like the Catholic Habsburgs are going to Epstein's Island, the Ehrenbergs, the Belgian Swiss Knights Templar Roman aristocratic family. There's an Ehrenberg on the Epstein list. Knight of Malta, the Knight of St. Gregory the Great, Rupert Murdoch's on Epstein's list. Rosa Monckton, the big charity philanthropist out in Britain, educated by Catholic nuns. Her brother, Christopher Monckton, is a Knight of Malta. And Rosa Monckton, you can read the quote in Vanity Fair. She said, like, Jeffrey Epstein's a great guy. You peel like one layer of him, and then you find another underneath. But like no mention of these, overwhelming Catholic, serious Vatican connections to Epstein and his black list or his black book on this RT segment. It was all about how he's just an agent of the Mossad. So I'll link this, but this is proof that what we predicted is happening, that they're using this Epstein case to turn this into a psyop about blaming the Jews for the current situation in the United States.
Eric.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Excuse me for interrupting. I know we've covered this before. I know we've covered this before, but just as a reminder, or for those who don't know, the Mossad was founded in the 1950s by Knight of Malta, devout Roman Catholic and Jesuitically trained ex-Nazi, or ex-Gestapo or SS, Reinhard Gehlen. So you had to second. People, they don't.
You're breaking up, George. George, you're breaking up.
Okay, you cut off a bit after you you brought up the great point how Galen was the founder of Mossad, but you cut off a little bit after that.
Yes, so devout Roman Catholic, trained by the Jesuits, papal knight of Malta. He was a Nazi. I'm not sure how many are tried or convicted uh, Donovan, and I'm sure he got out of Europe through paperclip. He just flew directly to the United States. And Donovan, like 1947, 48, arranged a meeting with him, Galen, and Harry Truman. So the rationale was, yeah, even though he had this shady past, he could be valuable to the West because of all the stuff he knows about Russia and communism. Now, okay, see if this makes any sense. You had somebody who was an instrument in the mass murder of millions of Jews in Europe. Now, granted, he didn't kill that many himself, but he played a part of that. But then a few years later, he goes over to Israel, which is supposed to be a sanctuary for Jewish refugees, and he sets up basically their version of the CIA. To me, does that make sense to anybody?
Well, I love it how you see all this myth and legend about these vengeful Jews right after World War II searching the world for Nazi war criminals. Meanwhile, a Nazi war criminal intimately involved with the Catholic Church created their top intelligence agency, and in so-called intelligence, quotes, unquotes and quotes, is the vehicle by which, wow, just about every major crime is committed. The CIA, if you put together the CIA, MI6, Mossad, and the FSB, you've got basically every major crime done through the Vatican and Vatican agents. So look up this clown Giraldi, and he seems to have a secular education, but I'll guarantee you he's a freaking Italian Roman Catholic out of Chicago, and his partner at the Catholic Intelligence Agency, who was also his law partner, Vinnie Canestraro. No, there's no Italian Roman Catholic there at the bottom of this vehement.
He sounds Lutheran there.
Yo, Lutheran, absolutely. This vehement, vicious anti-Semite who openly, I mean, this is the kind of stuff in Europe. If you do this kind of bold-faced, racist, hate mongering, and I hate that word hate because it's so manipulated, you can end up in prison for that. But only agents of the Catholic Church are free to just full on blame the Jews for no matter what.
Oh, think about that. What's that secret society in Kansas? The Society of St. Pius X. Like they're like a violent anti-Jew. Like they actually, they'll actually burn down like Jewish schools and like attack, Jewish property.
The Society of St. Pius X in St. Mary's, no apostrophe, Kansas, who trained up Timothy McVeigh in terrorist tactics because they have basically a terrorist training camp carefully protected by the Federal Bureau of Criminal Instigation. St. Mary's, Kansas.
There's a good article. I'll link this in the chat. There's an article done on the Southern Poverty Law Center on kind of some of the anti-Semitism that comes out of that Catholic camp, the Society of St. Pius X. I'll link that in the chat here. And I just wanted to add on Israel. I think I may have brought this up on a previous show, but this is coming from the official Bilderberg website on like just a little bio on Joseph Rettinger, a Jesuit who was intimately involved in creating the Bilderberg group. But if you guys aren't aware, the Jesuit Rettinger actually had a kind of a role to play with Israel. But it's the Bilderberg website here says that between 1906 and 1920, Rettinger worked on a project as diverse as the definition of a reorganization plan for Central and Eastern Europe. This is from the Bilderberg website. And who wanted this plan? Wanted by the general of the Jesuits, the Polish Count Lidichowski Woldemir, the creation of a world government with the British Federalist Arthur Capel. This is where the next part of what the Jesuit General Lidichowski instructed Rettinger. Lidichowski wanted Rettinger quoting from the website, the creation of the state of Israel what Liachowski wanted, in collaboration with some of the leaders of the Zionist movement, such as Chaim Weizmann and Nahum Sokolov. I'll rename it. So Chaim Weizmann, Weizmann, and Nahum Sokolov, Sokolov, were meeting with the Jesuit Joseph Rettinger before the formation of Israel. And it says Rettinger was also one of those many best who understood the contribution of the United States in the post-war world, contributing more than any other to establish the transatlantic Bilderberg group. And that's from like their own website. So like from their own website, they're admitting that the Jesuit that was involved in Bilderberg was in collaboration with the leaders of the Zionist movement before the creation of the State of Israel, Chaim Weizmann and Nahum Sokolov. And he was instructed to do this by like none other than the Black Pope, Volodymyr Liachowski. I mean, it's like the whole history of Israel is I might be pronouncing this guy's Zab Chabatinsky, one of the ideological leaders of the Zionist movement, like called fascist Italy his spiritual homeland. I might be getting that name wrong, Zeb Chabatinsky. But then there was also, Theodore Herzl, when initially when the State of Israel was being corrected, he basically had to go to the Pope and get permission to create Israel. Herzl had that famous audience with the Pope.
It was their agenda. It was their centuries-old agenda, and believe it or not, its purpose was from the beginning to bolster Jesuit biblical eschatology, to help erase Rome as considered by millions of Christians not too long ago to be the whore of Babylon, the fourth and final beast of Daniel and Revelation. But if you resurrect the nation of Israel, then you can spin a lot of lies, Jesuit lies, and all you got to do is look up at the Jesuits who have rewritten prophecy, biblical prophecy, both preterism and futurism, the idea that all Bible prophecy is already past or the all Bible prophecy is still way into the future. Openly admitted to have been created by Jesuits, Alcazar, Ribera, Bellarmine, openly admitted to have been created by Jesuits. The pre-tribulation rapture, dispensationalism, huge. The idea that God has a separate clock, and I apologize for getting into this Christian stuff, but it's important, I think, to explain Vatican agendas. The idea that God has special promises to the Jews. What they do is they spin people up with tremendous hatred for Jews or tremendous unthinking love, either way. And as long as your emotions are connected, you don't think straight. You, like I said, you either have vehement, unthinking hatred for Jews or tremendous, unthinking love. No matter what you see, your brain is disconnected. And so the purpose of this was to create Israel from long ago, centuries ago. You can actually find a plan to create Israel on the table of Napoleon Bonaparte, who was born and raised. He was on the island of Corsica. He was a young, it's like 5, 6, 7 years old as the Jesuits were leaving France for their supposed suppression in 1773. Napoleon Bonaparte was a little boy on Corsica, and erased from history is any connection there. How it is that the Jesuits made that a base of operations in the same way that they ran to Russia during their so-called suppression, and Catherine the Not-So-Great gave them safe haven there. So you can actually find with Roman Catholic priest, his confidant, Abbé Joseph Sias, whispering in his ear plans for Napoleon Bonaparte to resurrect the nation of Israel, but they fell through, and they continue to do it until they're puppets in Nazi Germany. It's just a master plan to just hammer the homeland of Martin Luther, just devastate the homeland of Martin Luther, with Nazism just thoroughly controlled by Roman Catholics, Jesuits, full-on ordained Jesuits like Himmler, and so Jesuit-trained Catholics, Goering, and
the angel of death was Catholic, Joseph Mengele.
Yes,
He's like the father
yes.
of the MK Ultra program.
I'm trying to think of the. Go ahead, Joe.
Well, actually, now, although the Nazi leadership was for the most part Catholics, you did have a few apostate Lutherans, such as Goering. But as I said, by and large,
well, wasn't Bormann also technically a Protestant?
Bormann was a Lutheran. That's why his son became a Jesuit.
Yeah, I was going to mention and according to Paul Manning in his book, Nazi in Exile, he says Martin Bormann, when he went over to South America, he was disguised like in a Jesuit cassock. But that's interesting that a Lutheran. It was just interesting that he's Lutheran and his son becomes a Jesuit, and he flees to South America disguised as a Jesuit. I just wanted to add that in, George.
And the Mossad knew exactly where he was, and his wife, and his son, and they left him completely alone. Never bothered with him. Never bothered with the family.
I know we've covered this before, but just as a reminder, William Tecumseh Sherman, the butcher of the American Civil War, he grew up Presbyterian, but converted over to the Catholic Church when he married his wife, and his son Tom became a Jesuit. We've talked about the Dulles family, John and John Foster. They also grew up Presbyterian, were high-level Freemasons, and John's son, Alan's nephew, became a Jesuit.
Oh, great! Yeah, this continue on this theme. I stand corrected. I mentioned Father James Francis Monroe, or no, Father Andrew Francis Monroe. He was a younger relative of the Protestant. I guess James Monroe. I guess technically was a Protestant, right? But I know he was a Scottish Rite Mason, President James Monroe. But one of his this officially Protestant president, one of his younger nephews, Father Andrew Francis Monroe, S.J., as you can tell, the S.J. was an ordained Jesuit priest, related to this Protestant president. And another, the President William Howard Taft, another supposed Protestant president. But Taft was in the Skull and Bones, and Taft was Theodore Roosevelt's personal ambassador to the Vatican while he was in charge, like the U.S. commander or U.S. governor in the Philippines. William Howard Taft had a younger cousin, Robert Francis Taft, S.J. Again, the S.J. He had a Protestant descendant of the Taft family become a Jesuit. So it's everywhere, how many powerful people in the U.S. had Jesuit priests as relatives? Alexander Haig is another great example of that, like the Secretary of State, commander of NATO. He was also, I think, Nixon's chief advisor or chief of staff.
Haig's brother. Haig's brother.
Yeah, Frank. I think he's still alive, actually. Frank Haig.
Like Taft. Francis. Yeah.
This goes deep. Walter Drum. Hugh Aloysius Drum Air Force Base, or the Drum military base in Watertown, New York. Drum was a powerful U.S. Military man in World War I and II, but he had a brother who was a Jesuit, Hugh Drum. Hugh Drum went to Boston College, but he had a Jesuit named Walter Drum S.J. That I found. So this is pervasive. This is all over the place, like in American society.
All it takes is that close relative, folks, to show the roots of Catholicism in a supposedly non-Catholic family, number one. And number two, to show the influence of Catholicism. Even if there's no roots whatsoever, if your friggin' brother is a Jesuit priest, you're going to be influenced by Roman Catholicism. If your son is a Jesuit priest, you planted those seeds somehow. George mentioned a previous show, Nixon's daughter, who's a devout Roman Catholic. I have a picture of SR 71 Teddy Hesburgh sitting at a Notre Dame football game with Congressman, or I think it was Congressman Nixon at the time.
Great information. Yeah, I found this was what the post I did on Fordham University in relation to Harry Truman getting his honorary degree there in 1946. But I found that Nixon also received an honorary degree from Fordham. And actually, when Nixon was running for president, the mascot at the Jesuit school, Fordham, is called the Ram. But the mascot at the Jesuit school walked around the Jesuit campus, but the vote for Nixon like billboard around campus. Like, are you kidding me? And Nixon actually had a Jesuit as a speechwriter. The McLaughlin, was it Tom McLaughlin, the MSNBC Jesuit?
John
McLaughlin. Yeah, he was actually Nixon's official Aber-Manhattan. I read that in one of his books, Vatican Washington Moscow Alliance. But yeah, Nixon actually had a Jesuit, McLaughlin, as his speechwriter.
An ordained Jesuit priest that became a journalist and a political insider, McLaughlin.
It's unbelievable, and just your point, so you're telling me that the Catholic Church doesn't have any influence on these Protestant presidents when all this. And actually, I just linked to your point about President Taft and Monroe planting seeds. I have a documentation here. I'm going to link this. I think Philippe found this a while back. This is from the New Orleans Bar Association. But William Howard Taft actually visited a Jesuit school in New Orleans in 1909. But I have the source here. It's called Taft Visits New Orleans, and he met with the Archbishop, and he gave some little cute remarks to the Jesuit students, saying, "You guys are fighting the good fight," or something along the lines like that. But I'm gonna link that in the chat here.
I swear.
Okay,
go ahead, George.
Excuse me. Well, this was apropos, believe it or not. Before the show we went live, I mentioned the death of Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens. He was on the court, I believe, from 1974 to 2010. So he had been retired for almost a decade when he died. Now, John Paul Stevens, when he retired in 2010, he created a gap on the court. For 7 years, from 2010 until 2017, there was not even one putative Protestant on that court. Now, Stevens, technically speaking, was a non-denominational Protestant. He never affiliated with a specific church. He was born in 1920 and he just died, so he was almost 100 years old. Now, he was a member of when he was getting his undergrad degree, he was a member of the of the Psi Epsilon fraternity. If you look up their image, this was at Northwestern, you can see eagles on axe that on a fasci symbol. But
you cut off George. You cut off a bit there. Did you say this Tau Epsilon? You said had the fasci on it.
It is a Psi Epsilon. Yeah.
Psi Epsilon.
Yes. You have it. You have two dragons. You have two dragons facing each other, and on top you have an owl holding, which appears to be an axe, which you use to chop down fasci.
That's the fasci right there. Wow. Yeah, the owl is holding the. Wow. Geez.
Okay.
I'm gonna link this in the.
Now, as I said. Okay. As I said, Stevens was from Chicago. As it just so happens, he happened to be at the right place at the right time for several historic events.
Let me underline, George, before you. Pardon me for interrupting. Let me go ahead and pardon me, underline what you found before you move on, and recommend to everyone. If you haven't seen, I think you did more than one, didn't you, Eric? You did more than one video on how many fasces and fasci you found. If you look at an institution, at an organization's heraldry, at the Roman symbol, how about you look at the crown jewels of England? how many Maltese crosses, how many fleur-de-lises, excuse me, the Maltese cross, the fleur-de-lis, the fasces is one, fasci, multiple. Thoroughly controlled by Rome. They're
Oh, it's
telling you
unbelievable.
that
Elizabeth had the adapt, like she even put the fasces and like Maltese crosses, fasces, and tridents on her coronation carriage.
perfect.
Couldn't believe it.
They're telling you who secretly controls. Excuse me. The Maltese cross that you still have. Francis will come out and wear a stole with Maltese crosses all over it. He's telling you, number one, who he controls, and number two, that is an ancient pagan symbol of sun worship. They're not Christian folks, and they control everything. And I just want to underline Eric's fantastic work on just the fascists. If you expanded that look into other Roman symbolism, dude, you go weeks. Every single major organization.
Oh, it's absolutely incredible, Johnny. And yeah, no, thanks for mentioning that video. I recommend people do check that out if you haven't seen it. Just the video is all just me having images up, and you just see the visuals of the fasces for yourself. And it's very self-evident when you see all the images that the Roman Empire is very powerful to this day. But I was in actually, this is a project I'm doing. I'm collecting the PDF copies of the Converted Catholic magazine. It was a great periodical that was operating in the 40s and 50s. Leo H. Lehman was the lead editor. He wrote the great book Behind the Dictators. So there's lots of good material in those Converted Catholics, and if people want to check those out, they're on your Johnny Cirucci archive.org page and my archive.org page, Eric Bowman 77. But this week I was in Cleveland, Ohio, getting some of these copies, and the library is right across the street from the courthouse. But the courthouse is called the Howard M. Metzenbaum Courthouse. And if you look on the picture of Wikipedia, right on the fasces are right in front of the courthouse. On both of the right and the left side of the buildings, there's kind of like this mural with like a lion sitting on like a flat surface, like a flat kind of semicircular surface. But on the outer, and I sent you guys the close-up photo, but on the outer walls of these kind of like semicircle pillars at the left and right side of the courthouse, you can see the Roman fasci right there. And this is in front of a U.S. secular courthouse in Cleveland, Ohio. Like, what are the Roman military fasces doing in front of the courthouse? Is called the Howard M. Metzenbaum United States Courthouse. This got me thinking that like this is probably like everywhere, like all over the world, in terms of government offices, especially courthouses. Like the U.S. administration of the Office of the Courts uses the Roman fasci. The U.S. tax court uses the Roman fasci. And with the current Supreme Court, there's 6 open Catholics on the Supreme Court. The only Protestant, Neil Garouche, was educated by Jesuits. Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, the same place that Kavanaugh was. Gorsuch.
Yeah, Georgetown Prep. And you know what? I think there's few Jews, but Ruth Bader Ginsburg, one of the Jewish justices on the Supreme Court, she has a husband. I don't know if he's passed or not, but her husband was a professor at Jesuit Georgetown University.
Yeah, you know the weird thing, George, is how close. Here she is, literally a communist Jew who was an ACLU lawyer, and yet she was bosom buddies with Mr. Federalist Society Antonin Scalia. That's just the weirdest thing, George, unless, of course, it's all a big show. It's all on it when it's actually created by Rome.
Well, okay.
God, George. I interrupt you all the time. Go ahead.
So, excuse me. Martin Ginsburg died in 2010. Yes, they used to something that President Obama came out with, or he made
with the Jewish face on.
Okay. One of the things that Barack Obama mentioned after the death of Anthony Scalia was uh, he talked about his death and a little bit about his life, and among other things, that the Scalia's and the Ginsburg used to like to get together on a regular basis to go to the Metropolitan Opera. So that was one of the things Obama had mentioned in passing. Now, speaking of
wait, George, let me reverse
Court
you.
justices and
Hold on, George. Let me reverse interrupt you real quick. Go back to Supreme Court justices. Go back to John Paul Stevens. I apologize for my meltdown before we got started. I thought Stevens was still on. He retired in 2010. But real quick, I wanted to add this, George. Antonin Scalia, before he got Logan, I'm absolutely convinced. I hope and pray that he was raping a child and the child freaked out and killed him somehow, like in the movie Logan. But he was a knight of Hubertus. That's
the Bohemian Grove, right?
The Roman Catholic secret society that runs Bohemian Grove and has many secret ranches, secluded ranches all across the country and across the world, where they have their perverted hunting of children and raping of children. This is where oh my goodness,
the Hunger Games.
Yes, good. Thanks, George. You read my mind. Hunger Games. This is where the Hunger Games came from that woman, that fraud, Collins, out of Newtown, Connecticut, of all places. Guaranteed that she's just a face for that series that was just built on the reality. I'm pretty sure that Kathy O'Brien says that she endured a hunt as a child, and I'm pretty sure she said Dick Cheney was the one that caught her and raped her. You can either rape the child if you catch them, or you can slaughter them. You can ritually kill them. That's where all this comes from, and they like to do that at these secluded ranches. You wrap your nuts in burlap and barbed wire for 6 days a week, and on the seventh day a week, that we call this the Opus Dei effect. On the seventh day a week, you can hunt and rape children. This is how you earn your ability to commit heinous crimes in the Catholic mindset. That's how you got people like Joe Paterno being Opus Dei. Robert Philip Hansen. These people are making these.
We know that's what the Jesuits do. The Jesuits want to rule an army of corpses. They want to wedge out any sense of like conscious personality, like empathy, and right that's in a person, and just turn them into like autonomous, robots who are going to follow their orders and like unquestionably commit, heinous acts if told to do so.
Spiritual disciplines do. That's what the spiritual disciplines of Loyola do. That's what the Marine Corps boot camp is based on. I know, I was there. It's designed to destroy self and turn you into a mindless robotic weapon for the church. And it's shockingly, sickeningly effective. George, do you want to pick back up on the Supreme Court?
Oh, okay. Well, I just have a couple of pieces of trivia regarding John Paul Stevens, who just died, as I said, this week. He was born in 1920, and so he was almost 100 years old. He was on the U.S. Supreme Court from 1975 till 2010. He had one of the longest tenures on the court. Now, just a couple of pieces of trivia about him was he was at the 1932 World Series, where Babe Ruth, I believe it was the last World Series for Babe Ruth, in which he made now there's some dispute. Some people say Ruth made a call shot. He was just, he allegedly pointed out to left field, but other people say letting people know how many strikes there were. But it
George,
also in the 1930s.
George, are you talking about Knight of Columbus and Freemason Babe Ruth? Just want to make sure.
Yeah. And a devout Roman Catholic, trained by the Christian.
Yeah, clearly a legend. A legend. Well worthwhile legend. I'm sure you've had, nobody else but him had the talent to be the legendary hero, just like Vince Lombardi Jesuit-trained, almost Catholic priest Vince Lombardi is the foundation of American football. I'm sure there was nobody else that was qualified.
Yeah, it's interesting in basketball. It seems that all of like the quotas goats. That's like that term is used like kind of obnoxiously these days. That refers to the greatest of all time. It's weird that all of the people in the greatest of all time category for the NBA are Catholic. Would you know that? Like Michael Jordan literally funded a Catholic church out of his own pocket in Chicago, sent his 2 kids to Jesuit Loyola Academy. He's one of the Michael Jordan's in the top category. Kobe Bryant's a Catholic. If people don't know, Kobe Bryant's in that discussion for the greatest, player ever in basketball. Rightfully or wrongfully so. But Kobe Bryant is actually Catholic. When he was in his, you can find this on the internet. When he was actually in I think he was charged. There were some rape charges put against him in 2005 or 6. And Kobe reached out to a Catholic priest for consolence and guidance. And LeBron James is a devout Catholic. People forget, well, where was LeBron James going to high school when he was the chosen one and drafted into the NBA? He went to St. Vincent, St. Mary's Catholic School in Akron. And LeBron James is, open about his Catholicism. Go down the line in basketball. The greatest Canadian basketball player ever, Steve Nash, went to Jesuit Santa Clara University.
Steve is a hardcore left winger. Another Catholic can get a hardcore left winger. Well, yeah, you're stepping on.
George,
you're in and out, George. Go ahead.
Okay, so just 2 more points regarding John Paul. Yes. Okay, just 2 more points on John Paul Stevens. During World War II, Stevens was involved with U.S. Naval Intelligence. He was a cryptographer, and he was involved with codes. Well, he just happened to be one of the code breakers that got the message about Yamamoto's flight in the Pacific.
All right. Well, I will add.
Just to clarify, that's George, the Catholic Yamamoto,
right? Yes. So he just happened to be there at the right place at the right time. So it seems as if that so as I said, as a young man, as a kid, Stevens got to see Babe Ruth hit his last World Series home run. He got to meet Charles Lindbergh. He got to meet Amelia Earhart. He was involved with the code breaking for Yamamoto's plane. So that reminds me almost of like young Bill Clinton meeting JFK a few months before his death. It's just like he had people grooming him behind the scenes to where he had almost like these Forrest Gump type situations. He was at the right place at the right time in history. Now, as I said, Gerald Ford nominated Stevens to the Supreme Court in 1975. 30 years later, in 2005, Stevens was awarded or honored at a ceremony at Fordham University for his 30 years of service.
Well, there you go.
The Supreme Court.
I think that's all. Yeah, that tells you everything right there. And I was going to say that the court itself, like the official emblem of the Office of the Administration of the U.S. Courts, has a Roman fasci on it. So an open Protestant like Stevens, it's in the symbolism that like he has to kiss the ring to to stay in his profession.
Now they love to use these non-Catholics to give them plausible deniability. However, more open Catholics are better for them in their loyalty. They will question less if they're more openly devoted to Catholicism.
Oh, like the hyper-Catholic Chief Justice, double-dipped Jesuit-trained Jesuit Philodemic Society member, Confederate soldier, Edward Douglas White, who signed off on the Federal Reserve Act.
Until you said Confederate soldier, I thought you were talking about John Roberts, today's Chief Justice. What's
Robert? Yeah, Edward Douglas White was definitely in the same. He's just definitely just as hyper Catholic as John Roberts, and both of them have done just as you could say as much damage. you know, to
I
the
just
U.S.
I just added this. I just added this Avro Manhattan citation in my upcoming book regarding Dwight Eisenhower. How far should I back up? Let's see here. I was talking about the Rhine Meadows death camp, and let's see here. As often the case, monsters were make extremely capable tacticians. Let's see here. I'm talking about Dracula the Impaler, Vlad the Impaler, atrocities in the name of war. This will be my upcoming book. Probably Romans of Mass Destruction will be the title. Atrocities in the name of war are nothing new, especially for Rome. After creating the Third Reich to punish the homeland of Luther, the Vatican used its pawns on the Allied side to commit crimes beyond the war and into the peace. Dwight David Eisenhower managed to go his entire military career without a single leadership position, not even a platoon as a lieutenant. But he volunteered his time to coach football at St. Mary's Academy in between wars when stationed at Fort Sam Houston in Texas. And it was the Catholic vote that put Eisenhower in the Father Andrew White House. And then I quote Avro Manhattan. I'll go ahead and read that real quick. This is a short paragraph. The American people went to the polls on November 4th, 1952, and sent to power the Republican Party. With few exceptions, unbounded rejoicing greeted the Republican victory throughout the Catholic world. The Pope himself, on hearing that General Eisenhower had been elected president, hastened to send by cable his divine blessings upon yourself and your administration. Quote, divine blessings upon yourself and your administration, end quote. Ustashi, genocidal butcher for Rome, anti-Pavlik in Argentina, asked all the Ustashi to hail the Republican triumph. Ustashi priests gave special thanksgiving in South and North America as well as in Europe.
That's a great, yeah, that's from Terror Over Yugoslavia. Is that where that?
Let's see, what am I quoting here? I am quoting, you're right, Terror Over Yugoslavia, 1953, page 12.
Yeah, that shows, yeah, and, you know, that just, you know, all the facts you just brought up there, you know, that should get with beyond reasonable doubt to show that Eisenhower was like a high class puppet. You know, his chief advisor in Germany during the war was lay Jesuit Robert D. Murphy, the double dip Jesuit. I think he was a lay Jesuit, Robert Murphy. You know, everyone around Eisenhower was super plugged in. Avro Manhattan mentions this guy in The Dollar in the Vatican. I don't know. Have you seen this name come up for Johnny? Alfred Grunther?
I have not.
He was a Supreme Allied commander in Europe. He attended Catholic St. Thomas Academy. That's a military academy in Minnesota.
A Supreme Allied commander, and he's unheard of. A Supreme Allied commander, he's unheard
of. And the reason I think he's unheard of is because he was a devout Catholic, and he was kind of like, you know, in The Dollar in the Vatican. This is in chapter, I think, 12 or 11 in that book. But Avro gives this guy probably one or two full pages, but he shows how Alfred Grunther was like Eisenhower's kind of like right-hand man. And when Eisenhower became president, Alfred Grunther took over the Supreme Allied position from Eisenhower. But Grunther was a papist. And, you know, Avro Manhattan quotes a Collier's article saying that this Catholic Alfred Grunther was the, quote, brain of the U.S. Army, for instance. But this is just another example of like a papist who is, I'll link this guy's bio in the chat, but this is another example of a papist who is right in the midst of Eisenhower, probably coaching him.
Ain't no different than Walter Bedell Smith, Walter Beadle Smith, who was a key general who George Patton despised because he was so much of a problem to the Allied war effort. Patton would go on to be assassinated at the immediate close of the war, and good old Beadle Smith would go on to become the very first director of the Catholic Intelligence Agency.
Beadle Smith, the Knight of Malta, went to Mass regularly, and, you know, after his stint of, he was the director of the CIA from 46 to 53. Right after he left the CIA, he literally joined the board of directors at United Fruit Company. And just what you said about Patton, you know, Patton was taking his job seriously, defeating the Nazi military machine, while he, you know, Reinhard Gehlen even admits in his memoirs that the devout Catholic Walter Bedell Smith took him on a tour in his private plane in the United States. So, what does that show about Walter Bedell Smith? Like, is he really trying to win the war by flying this high-level Knight of Malta Nazi Reinhard Gehlen all over the United States in his private military plane on taxpayer dollars? That shows to me that he's, a traitor.
Who was the place you're talking about? Robert Murphy, was it?
Oh, this is Bedell Smith was flying.
Before then, you were talking about Murphy.
Murphy was Eisenhower's chief advisor in Germany during.
He was also the papist who Patton stupidly admitted that he wanted to drive right through to Moscow. He wanted to end the Cold War before it even started, and that's what he told to Murphy. And I'll guarantee you that filtered its way up to Knight of Malta William Donovan, who was told by his boss, Eugenio Pacelli, the Freemasonic Pope, hey, you need to kill off Patton because he's a danger. We're going to keep this war going through the next 40, 50 years. Patton is
just to nail that fact, like the U.S. never once actually tried to invade the Soviet Union. Just people take that in. Like they never once actually tried. The Soviet Union was supposedly the enemy during like the Cold War, Edmund Walsh SJ era propaganda, McCarthyite propaganda, another Jesuit pawn. But like it supposedly, the Soviet Union was this great, threat. Why did the U.S. never once actually try to take out the Soviet Union? It's because they took out, real generals like Patton, and that's why the U.S. was, or the Roman proxy U.S. military was happy, to go into countries like Nicaragua, Panama, Angola, quote unquote, like small fry countries that, like, in terms of like skipping the scales of power in the geopolitical world, like it's meaningless. Like you're not stopping the Soviet threat by like in their ideology. They said, by us going down into Panama, we're gonna stop the Soviet Union from expanding in this region. Like that's bollocks.
Yeah, you found great information proving of how the West and the CIA is solely responsible for the rise of communism in China.
Yeah, it was Wild Bill Donovan who gave the initial go-ahead for the U.S. military. Yeah, they gave the communist Chinese were given like 50,000 plus pistols from the U.S. Grenades, C4, Semtex. Very useful stuff. Into actually, it was key to the Jesuits because the betrayal of Chiang Kai-shek. One of Chiang Kai-shek's literally his personal advisor during this time was trained by the Jesuits. His name was Lee Lindsay. This guy's known as the Mahatma Gandhi of China. So just how fitting that like they went this route to kind of because Chiang Kai-shek was their man for like 15 years or so. So they kind of did throw him under the bus and
until they pulled the rug out from underneath them, and they had the perfect plan on the inside to know his every single move before they pulled the rug out from underneath them and installed that monster Mao Zedong that we all just lovingly call Mao by his first name because he's all our Papa Mao, who slaughtered anywhere from 60 to possibly 100 million Chinese. We don't know because there's so many bodies you can't count them all. No different than
the blood. I'd say the blood. That's blood on the papacy's hand. Because that order came from Donovan, who was the Knight of Saint Sylvester, Knight of Malta, to give American military aid to the Chinese communists. Without that aid, they probably wouldn't have come to power. The nationalists weren't great guys either, but there's no way that Chiang Kai-shek murders 65 million people in the same amount of time. If he stays in power. And, to this day, recently the communist Chinese built a statue of Matteo Ricci, like the Apostle of China, in 2010. They literally spent Chinese taxpayer dollars to build this. The statue went up in 2010 in Macau, China. It was literally a statue of Matteo Ricci.
Matteo Ricci, the Jesuit who wrote their calendar for them and explained the stars to them.
Yeah, he was a very he fully infiltrated into Chinese society. He was at several ports.
Ricci was the first European to enter the so-called Forbidden City of Beijing in 1601. He was invited by the Wan Li Emperor, who sought his services to be the court astronomer and to write the calendar. Are you kidding me? Could you have poisoned yourself any better than to ask a Jesuit to explain to you the stars and write your calendar for you?
Theodore Geisinger shows in his book, The History of the Jesuits, that the Jesuits actually were so good at manipulating the Chinese rulers that they got them to ban all other Catholic and Christian orders except the Jesuits. So the Jesuits were allowed to stay, and the Benedictines had to go, the Dominicans had to go, the Franciscans had to go.
That's because the Jesuits are fanatically dedicated. They came and they were Chinese. This is part of the so-called Chinese rights controversy, where the Jesuits were so Chinese that other Catholic orders were saying, "You're not even Catholic anymore. Why are you there? Why are you in so much?"
Yeah, that was they were worshiping Confucius.
Yeah. And guess who won the so-called Chinese rights controversy? The Jesuits won that through their influence.
They're still, I got to get this to them. When I was looking at the Jesuit alumni list, I saw a high-profile Jesuit who is this international expert on Tao Buddhism. That's a kind of there is a similarity between the two philosophies, the Ignatian spirituality and Eastern Buddhism. There are similarities on the surface, so it makes sense that the Jesuits, when they went into India, Theodore Geisinger and R.W. Thompson, in his book The Footprints of the Jesuits, you go into the Jesuits would actually disguise themselves as Brahmins and as Hindus. They'd go full complete undercover. The average person can't kind of wrap their head around that kind of dedication to an insurgency.
They would
full on disguise themselves as a Brahmin.
George, they are doppelgangers. They go in and they become. It's like the seed pod people from Invasion of the Body Snatchers. They are doppelgangers. They go in and they mimic their host nation, and then they become a massive parasite, and just meld themselves into that. It's called syncretism. And it's exactly what they did to Christianity. Pagan Romanism wrapped up in the trappings of Christianity, where they can actually make you think they're Christians, along with all of their papal puppets in journalism and so-called history that claim the Catholic Church is Christian when there's no institution that has tortured and slaughtered more Christians than the Catholic Church.
How Christian was the Eustachi genocides that was led on and abated by ordained Catholic priests. That was, that's just disgusting. And that's a reason why that event is rarely ever covered by historians. That only happened 70 years ago. That's never ever.
Monsters, getting people alive and then making furniture out of their remains.
Oh, it's just literally just to get people. I don't mean to discuss people, but they were literally ripping children out of women's wombs, bashing people's heads in with sledgehammers, slicing people up and then pushing them to their death, forcing parents to torture their kids in front of them. It's just disgusting stuff. And it should shatter anyone's opinion of the Catholic Church being a Christian organization. I just wanted to mention also just the key with China, just their this is all intelligence agencies, but China has the biggest surveillance state in the world right now. There's officially, I think, 170 million CCTVs up in China. Even police officers, have facial recognition glasses that they wear now. That identifies all of the civilians or peasants, as Nelson Rockefeller would say. But what this mass surveillance state is just an extension of the confessional. It's amazing, I think, how more people don't see that, considering how all these intelligence agencies are Catholic founded. All of them are founded by Catholics, it seems, controlled by Catholics in the key positions. And just how in the confessional back in the day, it's all about getting all of your inner most secrets.
Dude in the chat's bringing up Sun Tzu and the mythical non-existent general of Sun Tzu before Jesuits supposedly wrote his art of war for
that's a great, fantastic point. That's a huge point with China. Huge.
Excuse me,
literally this general that came out of nowhere.
Yeah, nobody heard of. Nobody heard of. But go ahead, George.
Okay, so I know you're talking about Chiang Kai-shek a moment ago and Mao Zedong. Well, I mentioned him before. One of Eisenhower's advisors was Alfred Wedemeyer, who went to Kreisen Prep. Now, Wedemeyer, as I said, lived from 1897 to 1989. He was on the planning committee for Normandy. He was the brainchild behind the Marshall Plan, the Berlin airlift, and he was also an advisor to Chiang Kai-shek.
Yeah, outstanding. And give me the Jesuit breadcrumbs again. The Jesuit
Creighton Prep, George, you said?
Yes, he went to Creighton Prep, and most people have never heard of him.
So just like Charles Willoughby. Sounds like a man in black, working behind the shadows. Especially if he's drafting up the Marshall Plan, working with Cardinal Spellman, drafting up the Marshall Plan, surely.
Well, and I mentioned this other fellow before, Charles Willoughby. Forgot his German name, but he went to University of Freiburg, and he was MacArthur's intelligence advisor in World War II and in the Korean conflict.
Outstanding, George. I'm quickly going through my topics because I know this time is going to shoot by. We're already an hour in, and I wanted to revisit Jeffrey Epstein real quick and mention that I have to make a correction. I have to happily make a correction that I was shown that the Chris Evans that visited Epstein's Orgy Island was not the actor who portrayed Captain America, but another sleazy British DJ, basically a Jimmy Savile wannabe, a real scumbag. You look up this guy, and it's just an absolute scumbag. No surprise that he would join Jeffrey Epstein, It's the Jews.
Have there been allegations, like separate allegations or complaints made about this British Chris Evans?
Yes, and of course, nothing's ever come of them. And also,
if he's with the Epstein and Rosa Monckton gang, he's protected.
Oh my goodness, yeah, it's the sister of Lord Christopher Monckton, the Silver Spoon aristocrats. The devoutly Roman Catholic. What a creepy person. You found all kinds of creepy information on
that was very creepy and concerning. I'll pull up exactly what she said about Jeffrey Epstein. And this Rosa Monckton was educated by Catholic Ursuline nuns in Belgium. You mentioned her brother is a powerful Knight of Malta in England. Was Christopher Monckton, the Knight of Malta, was like a personal advisor to Margaret Thatcher. This is from the Vanity Fair in an article in 2003. I'll link this in the chat, but this is what Monckton said of Epstein. And the most sinister part is Rosa Monckton has a daughter called Dominica who has Down syndrome, and she subsequently is involved with probably 3 or 4 Down syndrome charities and probably 3 or 4 charities that are just about these charities are about helping children in need. You can see how sinister it is that she's doing all the supposed work for the helpless children while she's going to Epstein's Island where they're trafficking.
Bingo. On the one hand, she's knee deep in needy children, handicapped children, and on the other hand, she's going to Epstein's Orgy Island. She's a connection. She's a close connection. You showed on your video that her entry in Epstein's Black Book has an extra 6 or 7 lines of information that she was that much a connection for Epstein. Now, why would this Jew, this Mossad, quote unquote, Mossad-backed Jew, be so careful? This is the same guy who has a picture with his arm around an unnamed pope, according to Fox News, be so intimate with this devoutly Roman Catholic creepy harpy who was the best friends with Princess Diana before Diana's death. So
I think it shatters the Russia Today propaganda line, and I linked that video up in the chat so people can check out that It's amusing propaganda, but it's not amusing in the sense that thousands of people are being led astray by it. Like it almost has 200,000 views already. This went up yesterday. But this is what Rosa Monckton said of Jeffrey Epstein. He's quote, he's very enigmatic, says Rosa Monckton, the former CEO of Tiffany Co. in the UK and a close friend of his since the early 1980s. Take that in. Next quote. This is from Rosa Monckton. You think that you know him, and then you peel off another ring of the onion skin, and there's something else extraordinary underneath. He never reveals his hand. He's a classic iceberg. What you see is not what you get. End quote. And just to wrap up from Vanity Fair, the author says, Rosa Monckton recalls Epstein telling her that her daughter Dominica, who suffers from Down syndrome, needed the son, and that Rosa should feel free to bring her to his house in Palm Beach anytime. So that's pretty, sick stuff. And, this Rosa Monckton is not, an agent of Mossad. She's a papist. Literally,
a devout Roman Catholic.
Devout Roman Catholic.
The whole family.
Excuse me, Johnny. Eric, I know you've been talking about Jeffrey Epstein today and at least one other broadcast. Well, that reminds me. The general manager for the Chicago Cubs is Theo Epstein. I have no idea if he's in relations. And his claim to fame is he helped the Cubs win the World Series back in 2016, which is the first time they'd accomplished that feat in over 100 years. Well, as it turns out, this Epstein, Theo, went to University of San Diego Law School.
And that's a Catholic university, right? U of San Diego is Catholic.
Yes.
Yeah, just like the University of San Francisco is Jesuit, with these public sounding names. Yeah, great find, George. I want to mention Hawkeye. I'm so saddened by how Hawkeye's personal situation has made it almost impossible for him to join us because he made a great find. His computer's out. He hasn't been able to replace it yet, and he's got a lot of responsibilities. He put together the pieces of how within 4 days, Epstein, you think, okay, Epstein's untouchable. Well, he's not untouchable if he's designed to be a fall guy. Number one, the New York Times recently posted, and either Eric, you can do that, or I'll do that. The New York Slimes recently published on all the way back to when he was a 21-year-old high school teacher at Dalton, how he was noticed to be a creepy Jew who had weird relationships with students and faculty, and everybody noticed what a creepy was. It was exactly what I told you without the New York Slimes backing me up. Thank you so much to the supposed Jews, Sulzbergers at the New York Slimes, backing me up that Epstein was picked way back then, rescued from being a nobody high school teacher to being this whiz Wall Street financier who quickly amassed millions and then billions. He was selected to be a fall guy and a pedophile provider from the beginning, and this was just the culmination of their plan. And like I said, they would not be throwing him under the bus unless either there was overwhelming citizen pressure, which I don't believe there is, or there is already someone that has replaced him, a name that we were not being told. We have a new pedophile provider who's out there, the new Lawrence King, the new Jeffrey Epstein. And so his time is up, and they're going to throw him under the bus. And because he was the perfect Jew, the perfect papal Jew who kissed the ring but surrounded himself with other Jews, so that you look at him and his crimes, and all you see are Jews, and it's easy for you to be inflamed by these papal puppets. Within 4 days of his arrest, Hawkeye found there was a blackout at his Times Square mansion that he has. I'm sure he's got some gorgeous top-of-the-world mansion where you can just overlook all of New York City. And the entire block had an electrical blackout 4 days after his arrest. So they can footage of anybody and everybody having sex with children on his island or any other resort that he has been a part of. And it's just that easy for him to get thrown under the bus. When you have the power of the machine, you can black out an entire frigging block, go in and collect up all his evidence, and you can put that in the, the FBI files or whatever else the papists have the total control there. The great fine line.
There's no way they're going to allow the full story to come out. There's no way. You have to realize there's too many powerful people involved, too many powerful papists involved, particularly for this to come out.
This is just like Barryman Seal, who he felt he had the same thing. He had the digs, he had the information on how both Bush and Clinton were trafficking coke. And the CIA pilot thought he was untouchable until he was assassinated. And they went in and they confiscated all of his information, and everybody went on. You can't play their game and think you're untouchable. You just can't do it.
Look at John F. Kennedy. Look how he fared well. Like, yeah, he had the family Jesuit, Father McSorley.
Absolutely.
Initially, Emmanuel Josephson pointed this out, but the Kennedys, did get America into the Vietnam War. You could say later, they sidestepped, after they realized it was a mistake. But initially, Kennedy was all for, the Vietnam War. If you look at, Kennedy's appointments, early on, you'll see Jesuit educated after Jesuit educated, guys connected to the Trilateral Commission, or guys connected to the Council on Foreign Relations, Rockefeller, DuPont. Kennedy was, he wasn't appointing people who are going to make real changes. He was appointing, skull and bonesmen. Like, one of his key economic advisors, I think Richard Lovett, was a skull and bonesman. So, Kennedy was, playing, the game, all along.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think it is kind of a misconception to compare him to Abraham Lincoln. I think Lincoln did more, or I think Lincoln was more principled than John F. Kennedy.
It's another example of how Eric John Phelps is a knowing agent of the Vatican, and I'm convinced that he's an incognito Jesuit priest. So he blows up Kennedy to be this mythical hero. He absolutely was not, and he was the perfect sacrifice. He stepped on that third rail of threatening to disband the CIA, and that was the beginning of the end.
That comes from, was it Bob Woodward?
Yeah, CIA Bob Woodward. Yeah, to break the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the wind.
That was it. I don't know. It sounds. I guess it sounds credible.
Well, Woodward was a Yale Secret Society scumbag too. As a matter of fact, it was different.
He's a gatekeeper. He's written a whole book on William Casey, and there was some serious gatekeeping there. But I didn't mean to cut you off, sorry.
No, not at all. It was he was a different Yale Secret Society. What a surprise! And his Jew partner Bernstein there, that both openly admit that the CIA. As a matter of fact, I think it was Bernstein, one of his columns, where he admits getting a paycheck from the freaking CIA. Could it be?
Really? Yeah, Bernstein. He was he was one of the first quote unquote guys, blowing the whistle. I think he wrote an article in the Rolling Stone in it was 1977, saying that the CIA. He called Charles Douglas Jackson, the guy at Eisenhower's psychological war man. He was at Time Magazine at the time, but he called C.D. Jackson the CIA's inside man at Time Magazine. And so Bernstein. So he's an example of an agent who's given permission to out certain people, but not don't out too much. And that's why with Kennedy, a lot of people think that his speech, he was talking about this all-pervasive conspiracy. A lot of people think he was talking about, the Vatican and the Knights of Malta, the Jesuits, etc. I think he was really talking about communism. I bet he was going along the McCarthyite lines, talking about this international conspiracy of communism is out to. That's what I think he was.
That's one of the biggest misnomers put out by all the frauds in so-called alternative media to play Kennedy's speech when he's very obviously talking about communism. And who's he talking to? He's talking to supposed journalists, quote unquote journalists, and say, hey, listen, you got to toe the company line, and there's some things you can't be reporting because there's a communist conspiracy. It's absolutely what he was talking about. He was not leading the charge against secret societies and who we all know to have really be behind the scenes. He was talking.
And it was under Kennedy, like another deadly Roman-created massive government bureaucracy was created, the Defense Intelligence Agency. That was created under Kennedy's watch, and the first director, just coincidentally, was Joseph Francis Carroll, Jesuit trained, and was training to be a Catholic priest.
He also created his administration also saw the birth of so-called special forces, which have been completely co-opted and corrupted. I'm so disappointed in the information that I have found out about special forces. As a matter of fact, the Special Forces Center at Fort Bragg is named after him. I think it's the Kennedy Center there at Fort Bragg. The unbelievable crimes that have been committed from Vietnam through to today. You'd think that the special forces, and I used to say this all the time, the closer you get to the tip of the spear, the more real things get. And unfortunately, it is very real in the sense that when you fabricated the enemy, you realize that you fabricated the enemy. There is no enemy, but you're out there, you're creating the enemy. The whole purpose
that was the whole
Guantanamo
basis of Anthony Sutton's book, National Suicide. Like the premise being how like all of the Soviet Union's military capacity, came from American armaments companies like DuPont, and Hercules Chemicals, and Exxon. It's a great. I've read parts of it. I'm gonna try to go to a library and scan in the whole thing. But that's one of Anthony Sutton's rarer books. But it really powerfully shows how the funding of enemies works.
From oh my goodness, John O. Brennan, the drone executioner, to Guantanamo Bay. Why would the United States government, the United States Navy, have a CIA rendition torture facility in the heart of communist Cuba?
Yeah, I thought Cuba was enemies of the United States, and they tried 600 times to replace Fidel. Like they tried over 600 times. Literally,
tried 600 times to kill poor Fidel, and he's the Energizer Bunny. He kept going and going and going. He was unstoppable for some reason. 600 attempts to kill him.
Fidel Castro, if people aren't aware, he has the ability if there's a massive hole in his flesh can just magically form back together. He's got like special stem cells.
Yes, he's part Wolverine. Yes, that's what happened. And why would they have a secret rendition torture facility in Cuba? It's because the Catholic Church is the ultimate expert on torture, and their goal was to take innocent Middle Easterners who have the slightest proclivity to being pissed off at being occupied by Romerica and turn them into terrorists and then releasing them. It's basically catch and release. There was a released, I got to pull up the details, a released Guantanamo Bay prisoner that helped facilitate the outrage in Benghazi. It was led. They probably briefed the guy on exactly where to go and what to do. There was a Guantanamo Bay prisoner, I'll get you his name in a second, who led the assault at Benghazi. Do you need to know anything more? It is a torture facility designed to create terrorists because they don't exist. In the same way that John O'Brennan, the mass murdering drone executioner, would frequently drone wedding parties and any innocent gathering.
Oh, he's got so much blood on his hands, John Brennan. He also created he was instrumental in creating the National Defense Authorization Act. Like there was a kill list called the Disposition Matrix that was incorporated into the bill. That was authored by John Brennan. So we can thank this, drone executioner that now any American citizen can be, killed or droned at any moment. That should show you how, papal the system is. Just like how back in the Inquisition days, if the Pope or the magistrate, picked you out for persecution, it was your time. Literally, because anyone now can become a terrorist. Like anyone can become a terrorist in the United States. Like if they, just for example, like studied our YouTube channels, we would probably be classified as terrorists now in the United States due to John O'Brennan. But we'll keep going, Johnny. But he did create unspeakable horror, and that drove up the insurgency of Islamic terror.
It was the whole purpose. And I was
if there is no reason, like he gave these people, he gave thousands of Muslims with no reason to hate the United States a reason to hate the United States.
Bingo.
Because that's the way to put it.
I'm looking up. Let's see here. Benghazi, Guantanamo. Look up the name of this. Benghazi. Getting on. Oh, here it is. Benghazi, Guantanamo. Stand by. Former Guantanamo detainee. Oh, Fox News. Hold on, I'll get it for you. Former Guantanamo detainee was on the ground at Benghazi. Faux news.
Yeah, you mentioned wasn't that a Wave CIA like a station or like a CIA post?
Yes, Guantanamo, Benghazi. Benghazi's not the capital of Libya. Tripoli's the friggin' capital of Libya. It was part of it. Benghazi was a CIA way station where they were torturing prisoners and handing out guns. And the purpose was, after Libya was destroyed, after the stability of Libya was needlessly destroyed, then they had, I guess you call them tier 2 weapons, SA-7 Grail surface-to-air missiles that were being carefully and stably watched after in Libyan armories. Now, when you destroy the government of Libya, all those armories with those upgraded weapons are free to be looted and handed out. And that's exactly what the murderers in the Catholic Intelligence Agency were doing. And there were people in the State Department that said, whoa, 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 hey, let's not get crazy here. You're giving that these surface-to-air missiles to your jihadi puppets, and they're going to start shooting down airliners. And that was Christopher Stevens' mission. And Christopher Stevens was sacrificed. As a matter of fact, he was still an insider or a Chicago homosexual, Christopher Stevens. But his mission was to go there and stop the CIA from handing out these powerful weapons to their phony jihadis. And that's why we had, let's see here, what is the name of this guy? Former Guantanamo detainee. I'll give you the link in the chat here. Let's see here. With former
actually, that's just a credence to just. I was quickly like, that should be a warrant, like just a sign to Americans that we need to, educate ourselves more. Just most people didn't even realize that Tripoli is the capital of Libya. Most people probably can't find Libya on a map. And I guess that's just a problem. And
okay, fellow.
Sufyan Ben Kumu, George. Sufyan Ben Kumu, QumuU, is the name of the Guantanamo prisoner who suddenly and magically ended up in Benghazi right before the raid. Go ahead, George.
Oh, not to be confused with Andrew.
Yeah, Andrew Ben Kumu, who is the recent guest at Jeffrey Epstein's island.
Oh yeah, that was crazy. Yeah, that was I think that was a reference to Andrew Cuomo because it said Cuomo Kennedy and then it said like Andrew.
Cuomo Kennedy Kerry. Andrew Cuomo. It said Kennedy, Andrew Cuomo, and Kerry. Or is that just like everybody all in one? So you had a member of the Kennedy clan, you had Andrew Cuomo, and you had John Kerry all bunched together. Would you have a big Democrat party? Because certainly Epstein has done Democrat fundraisers.
Well, I bet Bill Clinton bragged in his speech to American seminarians at the Vatican in 1994. I have that on my Jesuit World Order blog. But he bragged about like my whole party is here at the Vatican and we're having a great time. So I'm sure there are some parties of that nature. And actually, George, if you want to jump in, just this would be a segue for George. I don't know if you got this message. George found this diplomat that was stationed to Libya. That's interesting. George, Charles David Welsh? Recall that link you sent me?
I'm sorry, Eric. I sent out so many things. Could you refresh my?
No worries at all. You send lots of great stuff, and I love you for that. But this was David Welsh. He signed the U.S. Libya Comprehensive Claims Settlement Agreement, paving the way for the restoration of full diplomatic and commercial relations between Libya. He's currently a president of Bechtel Corp. But this key Libya diplomat, David Welsh, went to Georgetown University, the Edmund Walsh School of Foreign Service. And let me see. And there's some controversy with, what was it say here on, this guy's there's lots of controversy that's followed this David Welsh as a diplomatic career. To sum it up, like while he was stationed in Egypt, he criticized Ahmed Salama for speaking against human rights violations by Jesuit-trained Donald Rumsfeld. Probably were human rights violations. But it says here his work in Libya. Let me see here. So I'll just read from the Wikipedia page. This is the David Welsh was trained at Georgetown. Just following the months of bilateral negotiations, the passage through Congress of the enabling legislation at the end of July 2008, and the signature of the Libyan Claims Resolution Act by President George W. Bush, the U.S.-Libya Comprehensive Claims Settlement Agreement was signed in Tripoli by David Welsh on August 14, 2008. Welsh described it as a very important agreement that turns a new page in the U.S.-Libya relationship. So foreshadowing the destabilization of the country in like 3 years. But Welsh said, quote, "Under this agreement, each country's citizens can receive fair compensation for past incidents. When fulfilled, the agreement would permit Libya and the U.S. to develop their relations." It says here, he estimated that the amount of compensation in question was $1.5 billion for the families of American victims of terrorism incidents of the 1980s that were blamed on Libya, and $300 million for the Libyan families of victims of the U.S. bombings of Tripoli and Benghazi in April 1986. In October 2008, Libya proceeded to pay $1.5 billion into a fund which compensated, American victims of the 1986 Berlin Disco X bombing were compensated by Libya. American victims of the UTA Flight 772. Actually, it says here, this guy was a big supporter of Gaddafi, and obviously, so this guy was this is quoting from according to Al Jazeera papers found in the headquarters of the former intelligence agency of Libya, indicate that during the 2011 Libyan civil war, Jesuit-trained David Welsh met officials of Muammar Gaddafi's regime on August 2nd, 2011 at the Four Seasons Hotel in Cairo, a few blocks from the U.S. Embassy. Welsh reputedly advised the Gaddafi regime on how to win the propaganda war. So it's interesting. So this guy was probably highly involved in the chaotic situation that turned out to be the Benghazi event. I just wanted to mention that. But they did a great find on this story. And this guy's currently at Bechtel Corp. Bechtel Corp is like they build like nuclear reactors and stuff. They're a defense company. So I'll link this guy in the post. But this guy's, he was involved in I just summarized a bit there. I didn't mean to ramble on, but this guy was involved with intimate agreements with the U.S. and Libyan governments. It always seems to be a Jesuit-trained official that's signing these treaties and whatnot. So I'm going to link this.
Real quick, it pays to check in on the chat, folks. And I apologize for not doing so more frequently. I apologize for not using my good microphone and my camera, but unfortunately, it just is a little bit easier. I don't have the supercomputer that Eric does. I can't pull up 20 tabs and still stream at the same time. But D-Boy in the chat, what a fantastic, he pulling a George on us and changing topics, said he decided to dig deeper on the Spike Lee movie that I mentioned last stream, Old Boy, with Josh Brolin and Elizabeth Olsen, who plays his daughter, and they have sex. Pretty blatant. I mean, how to describe it? Gratuitous, graphic sex, disturbing movie. The movie is the foundation of the movie is incest and scandal that arrives via incest. Fathers having sex with both sons and daughters. Just really, really, really a disturbing movie. And it apparently is this Spike Lee movie because he had nothing better to do than to do a movie about incest. It apparently was a remake of a 2003 movie directed by Park Chan-wook, who was educated at Jesuit Sogang University in South Korea. So rather than this deeply disturbing movie being Jesuit theater, it's a quote-unquote Spike Lee joint. Now, give me a second. I'm going to look up Spike Lee because that's son of a gun.
Oh, interesting. Spike Lee is interesting.
I guarantee there's Jesuit breadcrumbs in his background. But great
Well,
job.
I guarantee it too. Yeah, but wow, that's fantastic information. Yeah, and Sogang University is powerful. If people aren't aware, that's like the Georgetown of Korea. Went up in the thick of the Korean War in 1960. You know, they've just been pumping out alumni. Like the recent president of South Korea, Park Geun-hye, president of South Korea from 2013 to 2017, was educated at the Jesuits, at Jesuit Soigang University. So I recommend just the alumni list on their wiki has tons of, it just shows the power of the school.
Okay.
There's a Jesuit school in Hong Kong that's also very powerful. Let me pull that up here.
Yeah, I'm happy, George. I'm happy to report from Low Key says that the movie had a $30 million budget and grossed only $4 million at the box office. Gee, I'm so surprised and disappointed that they didn't get their money's worth. A really deeply disturbing film.
Well, obviously I'll have to watch. I haven't seen the movie, so I'll check it out and analyze it for the.
Yeah, just be on the guard. I mean, there's going to be there's a scene where they basically, I don't want to spoil it for you, but it's wrapped around incest, and it's a revenge plot, and it's just really it's really creepy, and so the purpose is to manipulate manipulate a whistleblower. Well, here you want to go ahead and watch it, and then you're gonna stick your neck out. But it's deeply disturbing.
Okay, couple things, Johnny. Okay, two comments. First, if you're a foreign country and the U.S. ambassador has been trained at a place like Georgetown, University of Santa Clara, Fordham, wherever, you better have a fresh supply of body bags available, and you need to alert your local grave diggers because they're going to be getting plenty of business.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Also, without looking into Spike Lee, I would almost I guess he's about 60 or so. Okay, dollars for donuts. He's probably a Prince Hall Freemason. Don't have any proof of that. But it's interesting. He's done a number of films with Denzel Washington, such as Malcolm X.
I love Denzel. Denzel, who was supposedly Pentecostal family, and once again, you've got Christians that send their child to get a good Jesuit education at Fordham, and boy, they just love to use the heck out of him.
Denzel he's giving back to Fordham. Like, there's a Denzel. He's getting involved with like the Fordham Film School. You type that
Bingo. All it takes is a little bit of Catholic hooks into your hide, and you are done. You don't even know you're being manipulated, and they own you as long as you have that warmth of feeling, the love for the Jesuits that taught you in college. You are theirs. They own you, and you look at some of the just the overtly Catholic agendas and movies that Denzel has acted in, and you feel sorry for the guy that I'll guarantee you there's no way that he is read in. Not no way. I suspect, I doubt highly that he is in any way read into the agendas that he has helped to create and bolster, because he just seems like a really good actor, and somewhat, not seems, he is an excellent actor. And I think that he also has some sort of a foundational discipline, personal discipline. I looked up an interview. Safe House, for some reason I came across because I was looking up.
I've seen that movie. Yeah, that was with Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah, Ryan Reynolds. And so there was a short interview with Reynolds on having acted with Denzel Washington, and Reynolds says he brings a discipline to the job that I've never seen before in my life. And so that kind of discipline and focus, well, number one, you get that from the Jesuits, don't you? And number two, there could be something deeper. There could be something really positive or something really negative about it. With someone who is really, really dedicated to something outside of themselves. I'm hoping that it's something positive where it's, self-control and ethics and morality, but who the hell knows?
I think part of it could, come from the Jesuits. And just I have a source for this. This is from the Jesuit Contribution to Theater by Henry Schlinkler in the Education Theater Journal, December 1952, by Johns Hopkins University. But it says here, a German Jesuit, Franciscus Lang, died in 1725, wrote the first manual on acting and directing. Take that in. But continuing, titled Disserato de Actione Seneca, and posthumously published in Munich in 1727. Based as the author does not fail to point out on his own practical experience, it contains detailed advice on speech, movement, and gesture. And interesting is that a separate chapter deals with the duties and problems of the choragus, i.e., the director. As a matter of fact, the Jesuits were the first stage directors in the modern sense of the term. What the Mengingers and Richard Wagner, Richard Wagner, the famous stage play guy, was a vicious anti-Semite. That's probably Jesuit inspiration. But what all modern directors have been trying to achieve, the perfect coordination and unification of all production elements through careful planning and by rehearsing, was realized for the first time in the Jesuit school theater. And if you go to this day, I just in the post I'll link this in the in the chat. There's a post I did on Daniel A. Lord, the fourth vow ordained Jesuit priest. Daniel A. Lord, S.J., actually wrote the Hollywood production code in 1930. But many, popular directors today are trained by the Jesuits. Like there's Francis Lawrence. This guy directed I Am Legend with Will Smith. He directed 3 of the 4 Hunger Games films. He directed Constantine in 2005 and Red Sparrow in 2018. Actually, Red Sparrow. I saw Red Sparrow. That was just This was that Jesuit theater movie with Jennifer Lawrence with the KGB and the CIA. Yeah, so that Francis Lawrence, this big time director, went to Loyola Marymount. For instance.
I'm surprised. You got Scorsese. You got Brian De Palma, Nicolas Cage's uncle. You've got the Guns, who were in.
They did the Guardians of the Galaxy. Yeah, I have it on my screen here. James Francis Gunn. He directed Guardians of the Galaxy 2 and 1. Directed Slither, Dawn of the Dead, Scooby-Doo 2, Tromeo and Juliet. He also did He did the Marvel. Oh, he did the 2 Marvel. Okay, the 2 Marvel movies he did were the 2 Guardians of the Galaxy. But yeah, this James Francis Gunn went to Loyola Marymount, and actually his brother, he went to Loyola Marymount, Jesuit St. Louis University School, and Jesuit St. Louis University.
Then got in trouble for thinking that pedophilia was funny. As a matter of fact, there's.
Oh, really? Interesting. Wow.
Oh, huge, dude. That's why there's not going to be a Guardians of the Galaxy 3, is because he made a joke about pedophilia.
Well, that's probably the Jesuit influence, right there.
Absolutely, you bet.
With the jokes, they actually, this was actually kind of disgusting, but I put it on my channel. You see that the comedian Louis C.K. did a Saturday Night Live segment, I think in 2009, where they literally put it in the open that the purpose of the Catholic Church is to rape, pardon my language, to rape and fuck as many little boys as possible. And they even had a scene where we're in the Situation Room, and they have this priest on the line who's like, Bishop Gagan, you're free to ass rape a boy in District 6. That's Gagan from the Spotlight investigation. Are you kidding me? They put that into I was just wow.
They allowed him to do that because it's the perfect mixing of truth with over-the-top psyop, where if you're in any way warm to the Catholic Church, you're going to look at that and say and be offended by it. Or if you're not, you're gonna gravitate towards that clown's atheism and attacking of anything remotely religious and or Christian. So it was the perfect psyop to run, to spin people. But see that even Saturday Night Live has the courage to attack the Catholic Church, no different than their puppet Voltaire, the supposed atheist who was thoroughly indoctrinated by the Jesuits, attacked the Catholic Church and then blamed all of Christendom for Rome's crime. Perfect. They do it all the time. Another one with Bushby. I think it's Tony Bushby. I think is the name. Who edited Vati Leaks? Same type of clown. Supposedly an atheist who blames all of Christendom for Rome's crimes.
It's
Excuse me, fellas.
definitely a subterfuge, and just like even like I'm just saying, like I think honest writers, don't do that. Just if you read Helena Blavatsky, like distinguishes Christianity from Roman.
I gotta tell you, I gotta tell you, George, and so it's amazing where you have someone that is basically, I would say she's a self-described Luciferian. I have rarely seen someone as respectful to Christianity as I have Blavatsky in her writing. It really is odd that yes, she very clearly, good for you, she very clearly delineates the difference between Catholicism and Christendom. George, you trying to jump in?
Well, yes. Okay. This is a follow-up on Spike Lee. Back in 2016, he spoke at the Pope Center at the Florida University on the need for stricter gun control.
Whoa! This bingo. Just keep going, George. Wow. So Spike Lee, Fordham, gun control. Holy cow! Jeez. Yeah, keep going. It's fantastic.
I'll send out. I'll email the story after the show. So anyhow, something I wanted to say. We've been going on a bit long, but a couple of things I wanted to mention before we close out the show. As I said, tomorrow, or I said before the show, tomorrow the 20th, July the 20th, marks the 50th anniversary of the alleged Apollo 11 landing, the moon landing. And I was looking at some stuff before we went on, and one of the astronauts, Michael Collins, grew up Roman Catholic. All of the men who have allegedly have been on the moon were high-level Freemasons. And if you think about it, if you look at the 1960s, I don't remember it because I was born on February 22nd, 1969. But if you think about that, that was the alleged moon landing was the culmination, was the pinnacle, if you will, of that decade. You could say a month or two later, you had the Woodstock conference or concert in upstate New York. Now, I've not really looked into that, but you could say in 1961, at John F. Kennedy's inauguration, he was talking about all the great things that he wanted to do as president, and he said, by the end of the decade, we'll put a man on the moon. And
yeah, George, that's a whole nother stream. Good grief. Am I still on? Yeah.
To celebrate the 50th, I think I mentioned this. You know the name Glenn Looney? You two have seen that name?
I have not.
Glenn Looney. He was actually he was actually in terms of Apollo 11. He was in charge of Apollo 11. He was in charge of Apollo 11, I think, to 14. But Glenn Looney coincidentally just happened to go to Jesuit Scranton Prep and Jesuit University of Scranton. He was the guy in charge of the Apollo mission. So just again, you show the perfect guy is in place for the Jesuits to pull off this moon hoax.
Yeah, I'll tell you, the only organization that controls space and NASA more than Freemasonry are the Jesuits. It's absolutely amazing. I'll take a second and bring up some of the names that we've come across of Catholics and Jesuit trained Catholics that are intimately involved in this psyop that is space. Let's see, I'll do that real quick. I've got a dossier on the NASSholes. Here's my dossier on the NASSholes. Papal puppets in space. Let's see here.
You got Jeanette Epps?
Yes. Do I have her? Yes. Jeanette Epps, Jesuit trained CIA twin astro, almost not. Alvin Drew, Black Catholic Jesuit trained astronaut. Edgar Mitchell, Demolay for boys, Freemason. Edwin Buzz Aldrin, Freemason. Mr. I had mass on the moon, but he was like Catholic light, right, George? Frank Borman, Demolay for boys.
Buzz Aldrin actually said I had mass on the moon.
They did. He conducted mass on the moon. Yeah, wow. Absolutely. Yeah. Jack Swigert, test pilot Apollo 13, Regis Jesuit High School, Colorado. Jeanette Epps, CIA, and then almost NASA astronaut. Neil Armstrong, Demolay for boys. Paul Scully Powers, Knight of Columbus. Elon Musk, the complete fraud of SpaceX. What a clown that guy is. Tom Mueller, SpaceX quote, top rocket engineer, Loyola Marymount. Vance Brand, DMLA for boys. The list goes on. It's Catholic, let's see, NASA administrators.
Oh yeah, there's been two openly, like Sean O'Keefe. He was a former chairman, CEO of DuPont and Dow and Boeing. He was the head of NASA early 2000s. He was all about the mission to Mars. He was educated at a Loyola school. That's
What a
Sean
bunch of
O'Keefe.
clowns.
And there's also actually this guy's in Trump's administration now in some undersecretary role. There's Michael D. Griffin, who is also a NASA secretary. The secretary is like the highest position in NASA. But Michael D. Griffin was the secretary from like 2008 to 2012, and he was also trained at a Loyola Jesuit school.
Oh yeah, I just pulled him up. Michael Douglas Mike Griffin. Catholic University, Master of Science and Engineering from Catholic University in 1974. Well done.
Oh, by the way, Johnny, could I just? Okay, you have the talk show host Mike, born Michael O'Dowd, who was Irish Roman Catholic. He was popular back in the 60s and 70s. Then you have the actor Michael Douglas, the son of Kirk. Now, the Douglases are Jewish. They're Russian Jews. However, Michael Douglas, the son, he's married to Catherine Zeta-Jones, who's Welsh Roman Catholic.
Yeah, so great job.
Do continue.
Yeah, one more name, Gene Kranz, Kranz, Apollo 11 and Apollo 13, St. Louis Jesuit.
Oh, I got another Apollo. Oh, great. No, fantastic, Johnny. I have another Apollo 11 connection here. Just Jack King at NASA. He wasn't an astronaut. He was chief of public information and public affairs of NASA.
Oh, the propaganda arm.
Yeah, Jack King was known as the voice of Apollo. He was best known for his announcement of the Apollo 11 not launch. And where did Jack King go to school? Ding, 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 ding. Where did he go? Boston College. Jesuit.
Outstanding.
So the voice of Apollo is trained by the Jesuits. Is how fitting. And there's another SpaceX connection I just wanted to bring up. You mentioned that Tom Mueller was the name of Loyola, the SpaceX connection.
Right.
But there was another one I found here. It was SpaceX legal advisor is Tim Hughes. He's the senior vice president and general counsel for SpaceX. Senior vice president and general counsel for SpaceX. This guy's the head lawyer at SpaceX, Tim Hughes, and he went to Georgetown Prep.
Okay.
Oh, wait, what happens at Georgetown Prep stays at Georgetown.
Yeah, and actually, just a huge one that I think we've mentioned. I haven't mentioned his name in a while. Just the name, the father. Would you know the father of chemotherapy went to Jesuit Georgetown Prep and Jesuit St. Louis University? You know, chemotherapy has ruined, how many lives they get.
Yeah. When you get cancer, you undergo chemotherapy that gives you more cancer. Brilliant.
Yeah, again, that guy here his name is Charles Zubrod. I'll link his wiki, but it just becomes foolish to deny the Jesuit influence. Like when you see them pop up, like literally, chemotherapy is so destructive. This guy went to Georgetown Prep, College of the Holy Cross, and St. Louis University. Like, are you kidding me? Like, it's not a coincidence when you see it like that in your face. And it is in all parts of society. We found like the guy who patented the ATM machine, Donald Wetzel, went to 2 Jesuit schools, and I have the quote in the preface I wrote for in the Dollar in the Vatican. He even credits Donald Wetzel, the ATM patenter, literally says, "I only got my job at IBM because my Jesuit instructor, the instructor at Loyola, the Jesuit school, was a recruiter in a sense for IBM, and he got me the job."
Hey,
so the power is all over the place.
Slight correction on Tim Hughes, the lead ambulance chaser at SpaceX. He didn't go to Georgetown Prep. He went to the Father Edmund Walsh Georgetown School of Foreign Service.
Oh, he did too. Wow! I just had the Georgetown Prep alumni list. He also went to. Jeez.
He also went to Georgetown Prep as well.
So he's probably actually controlling SpaceX. He has the chief lawyer. He's
also been chief counsel for the United States Secret Service.
Secret Service?
Yes. I will. Here, I'll put this in the chat.
Oh, yeah, I gotta pull that up. Holy cow! It's like in your face instead. And Elon Musk is a class. Actually, another example with Facebook. They always do this. Always. What was his name? Mark Weiner or Wenner, the current CFO at Facebook, went to Jesuit Georgetown University. David Wenner. Yeah, David M. Wemmer, current chief financial officer at Facebook. He was an editor at the Hoya at Jesuit Georgetown. Are you kidding me? When he went there, and he also went to he went to the Catholic St. Louis Priory School, run by Benedictine monks. So like this guy, I think, is another example. This guy is actually controlling Facebook, and they just have Zuckerberg out there as the Jewish puppet, and then like Facebook hired Jesuit trained Campbell Brown, the former CNN Fox News pundit, trained at Jesuit Regis, to come on board to Facebook to fight fake news. They really hired a Jesuit trained journalist to fight fake news. Like how in the open could it be that like there's an insurgency?
And I stand corrected. I did not correct you. I added to your great information. It was not a correction. You did go to Georgetown Prep. For some reason, my internet's not aligned.
Oh, Johnny, there's an article from called Hoyas in Space. Timothy Hughes, Hoyas in Space.
Got it. Go ahead, George. You're trying to jump in.
Okay,
I'm going to link that in the chat. Sorry, keep going.
Well, 2 or 3 years ago, Mark Zuckerberg and his wife went to the Vatican and met with Jorge. So Zuckerberg is Jewish, and his wife, I believe, is Buddhist. But why would they be meeting with Jorge Bergoglio? Also, another thing is we're talking about the alleged 50th anniversary of the moon landing tomorrow, and all the Catholics and Jesuits who've been involved with NASA as astronauts, directors, things like that. Well, then we can talk about Hollywood and the Hollywood take on space. The movie Apollo 13 with Tom Hanks, directed by Ron Howard, also starring Kevin Bacon and Gary Sinise. Ron Howard, Freemason. Kevin Bacon, Freemason. Gary Sinise, Roman Catholic. Tom Hanks, Freemason. Grew up Roman Catholic and Mormon. Sent his son Colin, thanks to Eric, he sent his son Colin to Loyola Marymount. So even when you're talking about the so-called moon landing or the space program, you have to have your puppets portraying your puppets.
Yeah,
it's full spectrum dominant control that they got. They got control on all like avenues. The actual they do that with everything. John, with the military, like they control the key military positions, and they William Donovan, Walter Bedell Smith, Gunther in World War II, and then they have Knight of Malta, John Ford, like make movies about like glorifying like the Catholic soldier, in America afterwards.
Oh yeah, and speaking
they do this with like every with everything they do. And actually, recently with J. Edgar Hoover, they got the movie. I haven't seen the movie, but they got the Catholic Leonardo DiCaprio. He went to see the Pope recently too.
Yeah.
And he kind of it was kind of weird. He presented the Pope what looked like to be like a flat Earth map, where like an oval flat Earth. I don't know, it was kind of interesting. Just the map of the Earth. DiCaprio gave the Pope, but they got this Catholic DiCaprio to play the Jesuit pawn J. Edgar Hoover. And like I did a whole like 40-minute video on Hoover. I recommend people watch if they haven't seen it. The information, there's great information in the book, The FBI and the Catholic Church, on how controlled Hoover was by the Jesuits. Literally got the sword of Loyola given to him in 1964. Received honorary degrees from like 8 Jesuit schools, like 10 whole Catholic schools. This damning quote after quote in that book that shows how much of a pawn Hoover was. But it's no coincidence, just to your point, George, that they got Catholic DiCaprio to play one of their biggest Catholic pawns, Hoover, in his latest Hollywood, quote-unquote Hollywood biographical. I think that came out in 2014.
It's no different than having devout Catholic Bradley Cooper and boyfriend of devout Catholic Lady Gaga to play that steel sniper.
Chris Kyle.
Chris Kyle.
Yeah, Chris Kyle.
Yeah, great connection. Yeah, Bradley Cooper. People don't know he went to Georgetown. Like he's a big, he's a big pivot.
Yeah. I mean, that's perfect. I've made this joke before, and I don't want to do it too often because I don't want to make fun of people's personal appearance. But you look at that guy and his profile, and it's like, how are you the sexiest man on?
Oh, they blow him up big time everywhere you look.
Exactly.
Bradley Cooper. Oh, he's the sexiest man ever. Oh, he can't handle his beauty. Like it's so over the top.
No different than Lady Gaga. Is she the most talented, gorgeous woman in all of music? No, she's just a devout Roman Catholic. Jesuits love like that they've blown up, and also a sexual deviant that they've blown up. And she has the open and Hail Marys thinking she's.
I'm sorry, Johnny. Were you talking about Madonna?
He was. I think he's going on Lady Gaga. I believe he cut out a little bit there.
Oh, I'm sorry. I always get Lady Gaga and Madonna confused.
Madonna's another big Catholic, right? She's
yeah. Well, it depends on the time of day. Sometimes she's in Kabbalah. Sometimes she's Catholic. Sometimes but she was born and raised Catholic. That's her. Chacon, I think, is her real name. Italian Roman Catholic, and just an arch pervert deviant, which is why she's been elevated. The list of notable alumni. I don't want to bore people with it, but I'll just throw a couple out real quick. Dylan Baker, the actor; Ian Harding, the actor; Eric LeRae Harvey, the actor; Mo Rocca, the comedian and journalist. How do you write that in one sentence? Comedian and journalist.
Is this Georgetown alumni, Johnny? Just to clarify.
Georgetown Prep. Georgetown Prep. They're notable alumni. I put this in the chat. James Whitaker, movie producer. William Bidwell, the owner of the Arizona Cardinals. Michael Bidwell, his president. Also, I'm sure his son.
Does both of those Bidwells also went to the Alta Mater, Georgetown, as well as?
Oh, perfect. Brian Cashman, general manager of the Yankees. Joseph DeFrancis, owner of Pimlico Racecourse. Lal Hennigan, vice president of the football administration of the 49ers. Roy Hibbert, NBA center of the Denver Nuggets. Chip Jenkins, gold medalist. Willie Ashton, NFL defensive end for the Denver Broncos. John Ricca, NFL defensive end for the New York Jets. Francisco Aguera Sacasa, Nicaraguan ambassador. James Alleman, ambassador of the United States from Panama. Michael Daly, the Congressional Medal of Honor recipient of World War II. Gee, I'm sure there's no fluff involved there.
Daly, he might be. When just the Dalys like ruled Chicago for like
probably related
years.
Probably related. John Dingell, this son of a bitch, the far left Democrat, he set a record. I swear this scumbag has been in for 60 years. They get these puppets, they get these corrupted puppets, and they sit and they drool on themselves 50, 60 years. The only way you get them out of power is when they get carried out. And the real despicable ones are like this scumbag congressman, supposedly reelected every 2 years. This piece of shit, pardon my language, must have been reelected 50 friggin' times. Unbelievable the amount of corruption and control.
What was the name again, Johnny?
I'm pretty sure it's the same Dingell. Let me look this guy up. John Dingell. I bet you it's the same scumbag, the far left, another far left Catholic Democrat who set records. Yeah, I'm sure this is the same scumbag.
Oh, okay, Johnny.
John Dingell Jr. Oh yeah, right here.
I swear it's the guy that has set records for being in office.
Just John Dingell. Oh yeah, he was U.S. House Representatives from Michigan, 1955 to 2015.
Despicable.
That is like in your face. This guy was also a chairman of the House, or he was a member of the House Energy Commerce Committee for 12 years. He was also chair of the House Energy Commerce Committee for 2 years, from 2007 to 2009. And he was the 43rd. He was the dean of the U.S. House of Representatives for 10 years.
Re-elected 30. Pardon my language, folks. 30 fucking times. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? How do you get re-elected 30 fucking times? I'm so sorry for my language. I just stick to death of these Catholic puppets entrenched. And tell me about democracy. Tell me about how these elected scum are actually elected and not enthroned and installed. Tell me about how Donald Trump is the great white knight outsider who got elected by the people. You idiots. Are you kidding me? 60 years a United States congressman. Re-elected 30 frigging times. Are you kidding me? What an absolute outrage. What a joke.
That is an outrage. Nancy Pelosi is probably going to be in office for, I bet, I don't see her going away anytime soon. She's been another, outrage. She brought a Jesuit into the House of Representatives, Stephen Privet, to, for prayer. George has mentioned, there's probably, her family has 3 or 4, Jesuit alumni.
That's her mentor, Stephen J. Privet, the former president of University of San Francisco. That's her mentor. She and her arch nemesis, her vicious enemy, John Boner from Cincinnati, right?
Yeah, supposedly she's always going at Trump, and it's just classic theater. But this is what I wanted to find. She's been in office. She's been a member of the U.S. House in California since 1987. Oh, she was chair of the California Democratic Party. She took office in 1981.
Absolutely despicable.
That just shows you the insurgency. Pelosi will be in office probably for 50 years by the time she's.
Christopher, and I'll stop here on this list because the list goes on forever, guys. All you need to do is look up any Jesuit institution and look at the notable alumni, and you'll get sickened. Christopher Dudd, Mr. Banking Scandal, another scumbag from the Dodd family, the Dodd family.
Just really quickly, that scandal, Johnny, involved just Christopher Dodd. That was with Countrywide Financial. That was Dodd and Angelo Mazzillo, coincidentally, who went to Jesuit Fordham, were engineering that Countrywide Financial racket. But it just must be a coincidence, right, that these two guys were
just a coincidence. He also went to Georgetown Prep, and his daddy Dodd, Thomas Dodd, the famed FBI Nazi hunter, is the scumbag that ran through the 1968 Gun Control Act that he took basically word for word from the 1938 Nazi Gun Control Act.
That's a key point, just because I think I've heard you mention this on an older show. Just a lot of authors do kind of champion the older Dodd as an American patriot.
A hero, an absolute hero who ramrodded for the fascists, for the fasci, ruled the tyranny of one under the Pope. And the gun grabbing outrage of the 1968 Gun Control Act, that in hand, the 1968 Gun Control Act and the 1986 Firearm Owners, inversely named Firearm Owners Protection Act, that arch papist Ronald Wilson Reagan, Knight of Malta Ronald Wilson Reagan, also signed.
Oh, if anyone deserves the title of arch papist, it would be Ronald Reagan. I'm sure his dad was a Knight of Columbus, Jack Reagan.
Yes, good for you. Born and raised woman. Nobody knows that. Nobody knows that about him. No one knows it about Sarah Palin. Born, baptized, and raised Roman Catholic, and now all of a sudden they're just conservative Christians, folks.
Mike Pence, Mike Pence's brother has 2 degrees from Loyola, and Mike Pence grew up Catholic. So he's a good, he's a good evangelical Christian.
The way that they have rebranded Pence, and I've seen some disturbing connections with Pence also being a pedophile as well. Accusations of Pence as a pedophile. For all his life, he was a hyper devout Roman Catholic, and now suddenly, magically, he's an evangelical, just like the pedophile president, right? Yeah, no.
People got to wake up to it. And I wanted to mention this. Just jump in here after this, George. What's going way back to we were talking about Scalia. I just think because his death kind of, puzzles me because I always wonder why, because Scalia was so read in. He was such an arch traitor. He definitely, was read into the Jesuit world plans for conquest, and he was serving them. Scalia ruled that police have no duty to protect individual American citizens, for instance. But I think possibly maybe but Scalia did one of his latest decisions was he ruled that Americans have the right to possess a firearm, and that I think that doubtlessly infuriated the Jesuits and like the Vatican power structure, because in the official Catholic catechisms, like they say that the Pope wants all assault rifles gone, that they even want to ban handguns from society. And in the catechism, the Catholic Church advises secular governments to enact and control the sale of guns. So I think Scalia kind of Scalia was an arch traitor, but that last decision, it was one of the last decisions he ruled that he said that Americans do have the right to possess a firearm. I think maybe that's
certainly
the reason why he had that accident, and because that's a right that the Jesuits want to get rid of.
You bet. George, you trying to jump in?
Okay, a couple of things. You're talking about these other politicians of the past. John, was it John Dinglebury? You said his name was, or
Dingling? Yeah, no, Dingle. Close enough.
I'm sorry. I keep hearing Dinglebury for some reason, but
yeah.
Anyhow, I'd just like to mention somebody in my backyard. My district, my U.S. representative is Mike Thompson, Charles Michael Thompson, devout, lifelong Roman Catholic.
Oh, so your mic's a little muffled out for me, George.
You're muffled, George. You're really muffled.
Okay, I'll try to fix that. Okay, Mike Thompson.
Still muffled. Still muffled.
All right, let me. Hello.
A little better, but slightly muffled.
Okay, I'll do the best I can.
That's a lot better right there. Yeah, we can hear you clear.
Okay, Charles Michael Thompson. Mike Thompson is my local U.S. representative. He's from the nearby town of Napa. He's been there only 20 years, so he's been elected or reelected about 10 times. Devout, lifelong Roman Catholic. Hardcore pro-abortion, pro-same-sex marriage, pro-open borders, pro-illegal immigration, pro-sanctuary states, pro-gun control.
He checks all the boxes.
Yes. So as it just so happens, a couple of years ago, I had to phone his office on a personal matter, and because I was, as I said, he's my representative, and that's not a joke. And anyhow, he was actually back in D.C., so I talked to somebody in my local office, and I didn't catch I forgot his name, but I talked to the office manager there. And I'm not exactly sure how this came up in the conversation, but his staffer said, I want to, I'll pass your concerns on to Representative Thompson, and your qualms are duly noted. And one of the things that came up in conversation was this chief of staff, or whatever his position was, went to Bellarmine Prep in San Jose, California. And so I think he's Thompson's handler. He's the one who tells them how to vote on issues, what pieces of legislation to introduce, things like that. But that's just my opinion.
Well, all these guys do have handlers. All of them do. Like, I have on my Hillary Clinton literally has on video saying that, I'm so excited that the new Council on Foreign Relations outpost is just here down the street from the White House, or from the State Department in D.C. Like, I won't have to go as far to be told what to do. She literally says that on video, for instance. Every single, we go down the line. One of Reagan's key advisors in the White House, during all of his treasonous days, was the current Supreme Knight of the Knights of Columbus.
Anderson?
Carl Anderson, yeah, and Anderson's Jesuit trained. So it's a key factor. All these guys, going way back, George, you've really found that Joseph Patrick Tumulty was Woodrow Wilson's personal advisor, and he actually got Wilson to act into sending American troops into the First World War. So that's an example of like over 100 years ago.
Okay, so I was just thinking, so you have these politicians, U.S. members of Congress, or members of Canadian Parliament, depending on where you live, and they really don't know anything about laws, how to introduce legislation, things like that, even if they are lawyers, because being a lawyer is different than drafting legislation. So I'd imagine they had to get people behind the scenes who are telling them what to do. Oh, yes, this is how you craft the law. This is how you introduce it to Congress, to Parliament, or whatever the case may be. And they said, okay. And so and so, Representative so and so, MP so and so says, yes, I'd just like to introduce this new law to Congress, even though he didn't actually write it himself. It was one of his staffers who probably did all the dirty work. That's just my speculation.
Oh, absolutely. Well, in the case of the Patriot Act, Veet Din wasn't official. He had no relation to the U.S. Congress, and he was the architect of the Patriot Act, a professor at Georgetown. Veet Din wasn't elected. He doesn't he's a non-elected official who's creating U.S. policy that's going to intimately affect the lives of millions of Americans. And I put this in the chat. The Philippe, I think, was the one to find this. The Jesuits actually put out a press release. This is only a bit over 2 weeks ago now, January 3rd, 2019. This was from the AJCU, the Association of Jesuit Colleges and Universities, ajcunet.edu press release. It was titled "Jesuit College Alumni Composed of 10% of the 116th U.S. Congress," and they give the whole list. But this quoting from, they say, for the second consecutive session, Jesuit educated alumni composed 10% of Congress. Among the 535 members of the 116th United States Congress, 55 graduated from Jesuit institutions, 12 in the Senate, and 43 in the House of Representatives. And they list them, and that's just openly Jesuit educated people. That doesn't count Catholics who went to Notre Dame or Dayton, or Mercyhurst or Manhattan College. That's just strictly, Jesuit schools. It doesn't count Knights of Columbus, people with Catholic wives. It's strictly open Jesuit alumni. There's 55 of them.
And how many of them hold key positions? How many of them are actually, it's more than just 10%, because of the 535, as you've already mentioned, brilliantly so, what about those with just a regular Catholic
education? I'm going to quote from the Jesuit source so people can't call us conspiracy theorists. It says, Jesuit educated members are well represented in leadership positions in both the Senate and the House. In the Senate, Senator John Barrasso, a Republican from Wyoming, graduated from Georgetown, serves as chairman of the Senate Republican Conference, while Senator Richard Durbin, a Democrat from Illinois, serves as the minority whip. In the House, Representative Steny Hoyer, a Democrat from Maryland who went to Georgetown, serves as the majority leader, and Representative Hakeem Jeffries, a Democrat from New York who went to Georgetown, serves as the chair of the House Democratic Caucus. They got both the... Are you kidding me? Both the Democrat and they're admitting on their own website that they control both the Democrats.
As I've said before, many times before, you don't have to control all 535 members of Congress, although I'm sure that almost all of them are controlled. But once you have a lock on key positions, key committee members, Speaker of the House, and these, as I said, these key committees that control finance and war making and surveillance, all of that. Once you control those key positions, everybody else will fall into line or else. So that's all you need.
Well, absolutely, and they all toe the line to keep the Catholic, this Catholic machine operating in the background. They talk about there should be outrages about this. I linked this also in the chat. That's why I'm bringing this up now. In 2009, there's a German bank called Pax Bank, which is fully owned by the Catholic Church. And Pax Bank was literally investing in nuclear submarines and abortion pills. Quoting from Der Spiegel, the Catholic Bank invested 577,970 euros in armaments giants BAE Systems in March, producing nuclear submarines and fighter jets. In addition, the Catholic Bank held shares in the tobacco companies British American Tobacco and Imperial Tobacco for 870,000 euros. This is... And just to, I don't know if you're going here, Johnny, but the Catholic authors always say that, this was a one-time incident with Michelle Sindona.
Yeah, that's what I thought, Eric. I thought this was Sindona and Jelly, 40, 50 years ago with the Vatican banking scandal being shown to have been involved in weapons manufacturing, contraception, and abortion. Wait, I thought that was a one-time accident. You had these renegade mafia P2 Vatican financiers who were making investments for the Vatican Bank, unbeknownst to the clergy themselves, in weapons and abortion and contraception. That was a scandal from 50, 60 years ago. You're getting this mixed up. That's not something recent, Eric. Then for that to be true, that must mean that the Vatican Bank was doing it all along, and it was really not a one-time scandal. That can't be true.
Yeah, and again, it blows that Jesuit psyop out of the water, and supposedly like the Vatican's investment in Beretta Arms was like a one-time thing with Sedona, and that guarantee is not the case. Like BAE Systems is it's a British military it's one of the biggest weapons manufacturers in the world. And it just I think this is just the tip of the iceberg. Like how many more that's just what Der Spiegel exposed. There's definitely infinitely more investments of that nature out there that the current system is protecting. I linked these in the chat. I sent you these guys a while back. I don't know how this is on the internet, but I found two financial statements from the South African bank called Saffron Wealth Fund Management, and they have the Knights of Malta have an investment account here. And they have like $15 million in these accounts. It says they got shares in 3M. They got shares in 3M in here. Where is it? That's one of the few companies they list. But it says here they got shares in Zambia. In particular, there's one account for the Knights of Malta that's $15 has investments in Guyana, Nigeria, Botswana, United States, Zambia, Gabon, and Nigeria. And they've invested 43% of the investment is in the government sector. What is that? So like this should just show you people that, like, there's a whole another world of their Vatican wealth and intrigues. Did you guys that program? I found Father Felix Morlian. This is in the post I did on him on Reddit. But I found in the 60s there was a program being run with the Vatican and the Inter-American Development Bank. Where the banker Grayton Upton literally said that the Pope has made a decision to indoctrinate the Latin American priests in the U.S. system of free enterprise economics. So the Pope is saying, let's indoctrinate our priests with the principles of crony capitalism, and it's just a program like that should show people that there's a whole underworld, being at play. Father Marlian bragged about how he got billions of dollars from American businessmen being sent down to South America via Pro-Dio in the Inter-American Development Bank to set up this program. I have that all documented. I'll link that in the chat now that I bring that up. But it should show people that there's just a whole nother world of intrigue. Like, did you guys see, like, John, did you see the on my video on the Fasciites, did you see the Habsburg castle, the Schroben Palace in
no, I missed it.
That was but yeah, actually people should look up pictures of that palace and just look at pictures of that palace and then look up pictures of like East Cleveland or Detroit, Michigan, or Gary, right. Indiana.
Oh, I did. No, I take it back. I did. The palace over the gorgeous pond with the huge palace. Yes, I did see that.
Yeah, it almost looked like kind of like a Versailles replica. They had the huge pond. And
yes. Also reminds me of St. Petersburg, the Winter Palace there. Similar, same thing with Peter the Not So Great, who slaughtered hundreds of Russians to build his winter palace. Just as gorgeous. I love your comment. By the way, I resemble your comment there. You said take a look at Camden, New Jersey after you look at this. Yeah, been through Camden many times. Apt comment. Apt comment.
These guys are it's hard for the average person to just picture the realm that these are Catholic. As you'd say, caviar,
yes,
eel-eating aristocrats are living. Like, for the Brady's, like, look at pictures of the Innisfada residence that the Brady's literally gifted to the Jesuits. They gave the whole mansion. This was one of the biggest mansions in Long Island, New York. Are you kidding me? gave
a lot of this
gave
came
them
out,
to gave it to the Jesuits. The whole thing.
a lot of this came out in the Kavanaugh scandal when you see this undercurrent, this silver spoon, Maryland, caviar eating, child raping, golf playing, cigar smoking undercurrent, this a subculture of these papists that secretly rule and live these sickeningly lavish lives. Deeply, deeply disturbing. Who was that twit that accused him of being a
Ford.
that's,
Blasey
what's her
Ford.
name, George?
Christine Blasey Ford.
Yeah. Christine hyphen Blasey Ford. Yeah, Blase Ford. Yeah, the same thing. She grew up the same friggin' way. Silver spoon in her mouth and eating caviar for breakfast. Same thing. They're all going to these elite Catholic private schools, Georgetown Prep, and she went to a separate little girls' convent where they taught the little girls to control yourselves, and they went out and whored and slutted with the boys, and then they had the nerve to complain about it afterwards.
Well, I'm saying you
Yeah,
see people got to realize, and for Georgetown Prep, like, where Kavanaugh went, like the tuition is like something like $50,000 or $60,000 a year.
unbelievable.
That should show you how elitist that school is. Like that's.
This is for the high school, the post high school, pre college. That's supposed to just set you up. Are you kidding me? My college didn't cost that much. I guess it shows, but still.
Oh, it's crazy, and even across the board, like even like the non. Well, I have to check if this school is Catholic. I played a football match at one of these elite private schools here in Ontario a few years ago. It's called St. Andrew's College, and I think they're paying like something like $30,000 a year for tuition. But like it's across the board. Like the elite the elite don't educate their kids at regular schools. They go to these. The school where Epstein was turned into the puppet fall guy Jew, Dalton School is an example of one of these, elite spoon-fed caviar-eating aristocrat schools. But like all these schools, I do think it's telling though that like Georgetown Prep is the most expensive of these elitist prep schools because that's the Jesuit prep school.
Where
but
the
all these elite prep schools are ridiculously expensive. Where like the average, family, it's a pipe dream to send their kids there. It's only the elite.
What are the Jesuits doing with all that money? What are the Jesuits? I'm sure they all took vows of poverty, right? Just like they did at boys' towns and breaking in millions and millions of dollars a year at an orphanage for little boys. It has nothing to do with the child sex slave trade, I'm sure. Unbelievable.
People might realize, the Jesuits were some of the biggest traders. Go back to the 1700s. It was the Portuguese Jesuits running the slave trade out of Lisbon.
Absolutely.
The biggest slave markets.
They owned all the key positions, particularly in South America. Their communes, their reduction communes, were on strategic locations throughout all of South America, through the Peru and Bolivia.
I'm pretty sure they even came up into America. I believe.
Absolutely.
I think it was some dude made this comment. It was the Jesuit Pierre Jean de Smet. Created like a few reduction camps in like the western United States.
Native American, yeah. Pierre Jean de Smet, who was the handler for Pike.
Yeah, I gotta read a biography on because I've heard that he was also a connection to Mormonism.
Yes, very much so. As a matter of fact, the Mormon massacre on September 11th in the 1890s. Can be traced. He was connected to Brigham Young. Brigham Young was the power behind the founder of the Mormons, Joseph Smith. Brigham Young was the real power, and Brigham Young was buddy with Pierre Jean de Smet.
Oh wow! So it lines up, and just the whole history of the Jesuit order is like a history of slavery. If you think about it, like they had to in the openly apologize recently. This got a fair bit of mainstream press. No, I didn't see any news channels talking about it, but like the Washington Post and the New York Times even wrote an article on this. But like Georgetown had admitted to selling, I think it was like 300 slaves in 1838, and like they supposedly apologized for this. but
Yeah,
it shows you the true nature of Jesuitism. And like, it was I've seen this in like 3 or 4 books on the Jesuit order. This is from Giovanni Niccoloni's book on the Jesuits in the 1850s and Theodore Greisinger's book on the Jesuits in 1877. But it was actually, of all the people, it was Lorenzo Ricci who said this when it was Luke Catholic. This guy, he was Catholic. Catholic Louis XV of France came to Lorenzo Ricci begging him to change the rules of the Jesuit order. And Lorenzo Ricci said, I'm paraphrasing this, but he said, as long as the Jesuits exist, like, let them be or let them be not. That was like his. So Ricci said to Louis XV that the Jesuit order will never change as long as the Jesuits are in existence. So the fact that they're selling slaves in the 1800s, like they never change and never will change. Pope. The current Pope was deeply involved in the Argentina military junta before becoming Pope, involved in the trafficking, probably thousands of missing people. Like, hundreds of thousands went missing in Valera's regime. Or who's the it was Valera, yeah, and the dictator of Argentina in the 70s. And you can see a photo of Francis blessing him, giving him a wafer. So, the mentality of the Jesuit is still identical. They'll never ever change. That's just the nature of who they are. In 1998, E. Howard Hunt said the Jesuits formed the greatest intelligence service in the world and always have. So that's pretty recent. So that's in the 90s. As of 1998, according to a high-level CIA official, the Jesuits, are head and shoulders above everyone in intelligence. And when you see they're endorsing the communist China. I'll let you guys jump in. I don't mean to ramble, but like you see, the Jesuits are getting behind the communist Chinese regime, which has enslaved millions. The Chinese may think that they're free because they have a bunch of new highways over there now. I just saw recently that China passed America for most miles of controlled access freeways, and the new Chinese road system does look nice, but they're completely enslaved over there. Everything they do is monitored, and the Jesuits are being in the open saying that this is the society we want the world to follow, is the Chinese model.
Yeah, that was the. By the way, real quick, it was the Mountain Meadow Massacre in 1857, where Mormons just slaughtered a wagon train of unsuspecting. I'm pretty sure they're just Christian immigrants moving across the country, and it occurred on September 11th in 1857. Mountain Meadow Massacre.
Well, I would love that. Thanks for bringing that up. Another interesting to September 11th that people aren't aware is that the Jesuit Retreat House in New York City went up on September 11th. That was September 11th, 1921.
The pentagram, the war building based upon the Farnese family, the 5-sided Farnese family castle went up. First stone was laid on September 11th, 1941, just before Pearl Harbor.
Oh wow! This cannot be coincidences at all. And I found just recently the guy who was in charge of the New York Port Authority when the building was built, the World Trade Center complex. This guy was in charge of the Port Authority from like 42 to 72. Austin J. Tobin went to Fordham and Holy Cross. So I was like, could you have more of a Reading guy to because they knew they were going to knock down these buildings like 30, 40 years before they actually knocked them down. This was a grand plan and design. So, but the guy who literally on his Wikipedia will say Austin J. Tobin is credited for, getting the project going to build these buildings. He literally went to Fordham and, Holy Cross. So that's like in your face. His name is in the quote unquote 9/11 truth, put quotes around that, the 9/11 truth movement. His name is nowhere. You never hear Austin J. Tobin.
Oh, that's unusual. What's the last name? Austin, what is it?
Tobin, Tobin. There's a current. I think the new World Trade Center, the new complex. There's the Austin J. Tobin Plaza is there. So they named the main plaza after their Jesuit coadjutor.
Yeah, perfect position to exactly as you said. Set up what they had planned years prior.
Yeah, and actually, they knocked that building down 33 years after they built it. Which I think is kind of significant.
That's a coincidence.
And just another 33. John Brennan was in the government for 33 years before he took his job currently at.
The drone executioner.
Jonah, yeah, he's now the head of Fordham's National Security Council. A great position.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, we should probably wrap it up. George, you can start wrapping us up.
Okay, one thing, I mentioned this before the show or the beginning of the show, is in the last week or so, there's been yet another flap in the D.C. between Donald Trump and several freshman congresswomen. They're commonly called the Squad. Ilhan Omar, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, Rashida Tlaib, and Aisha Presley, I believe, or Ayanna Presley. She's from Massachusetts. Tlaib is from Michigan. Omar is from Minnesota, and Ocasio-Cortez is from New York. Ilhan Omar, as I said, was born in Mogadishu, Somalia, in 1982, and her family came to the United States in the early 1990s, or actually in the mid-1990s. They first went to Kenya, then they came to New York, then they ultimately settled in Minnesota. Now, as I said on previous shows, the whole Somali Civil War was completely orchestrated by Rome. As I said, the U.S. ambassador at the time was James Kehoe Bishop, who went to Holy Cross. Bishop was also in Nigeria, or Liberia, rather, at the beginning of their first civil war. So, 1991-93, Somalia had its civil war. It started under George H.W. Bush and was finished under Bill Clinton. So, in 1994, CARE, the Council on CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, was founded. One of the co-founders was Omar Abad, who went to
George, I found he was actually George. He was. I just found not to try to cut you off, but he was like the main guy founding it. I confirmed that.
Okay, so there's a couple of
George, did you mention this that Somalia was colonized by Italy? Did you mention that? I missed it.
Oh,
in the same way.
I'm sorry, I did not know that.
Yeah.
I missed that in my
research. That's probably what in the video I found. There was a stone in Somalia. They found like a big stone, and there's a Roman military fasces carved on this like big stone in the Somali desert. That probably went up under the Italian occupation.
And in the same way that they also colonized Ethiopia, and Ethiopia was part of the opening for World War II. And there's a great article in the magazines you found, Eric, the converted Catholic, on Haile Selassie, the hyper Freemason, the emperor of Ethiopia, who just all in kissed the ring. I forget which issue it is. I'll have to look it up again. But great article there on it.
Well, does it mention that he was given the Order of Pius IX? I think that was the.
No, I don't think it even mentioned that in that article. It was just about how he had completely gone in, sent an ambassador to Rome, and he was all in for kissing the ring. I have to look up the details. But go ahead, George, finish up because we should probably close out. We've been going for.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, so Ilhan Omar has spoken for CARE before. So we talked about how Somalia got destroyed in the early 1990s, thanks to the Jesuits. So,
just for the viewers, I don't think we clarified this. Omar Ahmad, the founder of CARE, was Jesuit trained at Santa Clara. I wanted to add that in quick.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought I mentioned that. So, anyhow, before she became a U.S. representative, Ilhan Omar was a state representative of Minnesota. But in February of last year, she announced her candidacy for U.S. representative at a Catholic church in Minneapolis, St. Joan of Arc. So Omar has been a complete people puppet her entire brief political career. Her colleague Tlaib, Rashida Tlaib, announced her candidacy for U.S. Congress and Detroit Mercy College. And she has spoken there several times. Alexander,
that shows us significant. She announced her desire to run there.
Yes,
and just she didn't go there, right? She just she announced it there.
Yes.
Okay, so that's another example of how the Jesuits, can control someone without them openly attending their school. Sorry, keep going. To great information.
Alexander Ocasio-Cortez, grew up nominally Catholic. I don't think she's practicing now. So at least.
Oh, I think she is, George. Just sorry to cut you off again. Just Ocasio-Cortez actually wrote an article in the Jesuits magazine, America magazine, and I think that was in like 2018. And the article was something along the lines like of what my Catholic faith means to me, if I'm remembering properly. I just think, and just how passionately she defends the Catholics coming over the border. She was literally, I saw it in the house. She was almost like crying this week in the house. She's like, we're being so mean to them. We need to let them all come over. This is America. Just like she was really like breaking down, like sobbing in the room. I'm saying she's a top Jesuit asset, pulling at people's heartstrings, like the illegal.
And there you have the secret reason why the borders have been treasonously wide open for decades, for generations. We have millions upon millions. Every clown, every conservatard clown that gives you a number of 10 million here and 15 million there, they're lowballing, hugely lowballing. This country is inundated with Roman Catholic, leftist trained, socialist immigrants, illegal immigrants, to radically alter the face of the country and to thoroughly empower the Roman puppets. And you don't have to look any further than the People's Republic of Mexiponia at how successful this sickening, outrageous agenda has been. I live in Pennsylvania, and I am hip deep in Roman Catholic, illegal Hispanic immigrants. I walk out my door, and all I hear is friggin' Spanish. And it's not a racist thing; it's a religious thing. So, guys, I don't want to make you guys.
They're shoving it down people's throats. Like, I think, George, you mentioned this to me. Like, at the recent debates, like the candidates were speaking in Spanish, like when they didn't clearly they didn't have to.
They purposefully know that it has little to do with ethnicity. It just so happens that they have owned Hispanic Central and South America with their agents of insurgency, with their poison parasitic religion. And so they twist it and warp it to make it a racial issue so that there is no common sense involved.
We're the only ones I see like in the open talking about how this is an issue about a mass invasion of Roman Catholics coming in the United States who are then going to perpetually vote the Roman Catholic candidates into office, which will give more favors to the Roman Catholic Church and which will ultimately further the power of the Roman Catholic Church. No one's making that connection. Like you said, everyone's making this into a race issue. Like no one is pointing out just the obvious fact that 95% of these people coming over are Catholics. That's the Catholic Church. Catholics are instructed to vote for Catholic candidates. It's a sin not to vote for Catholic candidates.
I'll say the Scorsese movie, I think it was Gangs of New York, where you had Daniel Day-Lewis portraying the Protestant gang leader. And there's a great line. I mean, it's cartoonish the way, he's vicious. He's a vicious murdering thug. And that he has this truth about Catholic immigrants coming off the boat. And he has this line, this dialogue with this politician. And he says, see that? You have Americans coming. I said, they're not Americans. They vote the way their boss in the pointy hat tells them to vote. And it's absolutely true, but it's voiced by a thug, by a murdering thug. So you discount the truth of it.
That's a great way. Yeah, that's great Jesuit theater then that they have this.
That's why Scorsese did it. Guys, keep up the great work. Let's do this again real soon.
Oh, great!
You keep going. You guys keep going.
We gotta go. Okay, George. Yeah, I'll give George. If you want to wrap up, I gotta go in probably in 5-10 minutes here. But if you want to close
Okay. Okay. Take care, Johnny. So there's Eric, have you seen Gangs of New York?
Gangs. I've seen like the ads and the infomercials, but I haven't watched the show.
Okay. Well, there's a great line in the movie where I guess these supposedly Protestant thugs are going to fight these Catholic thugs. The whole premise is ridiculous for a myriad of reasons. But there's a line where Daniel Day-Lewis's character, Butcher Bill, says before they engage in this little fray, but the Lord my God has strengthened my hands against your Roman popery. I mean, but
sounds like John Knox or like Luther preaching.
But
I'll have to watch that movie. Yeah, because that's was this kind of going into like the Protestants part of the Know Nothing Party, George?
Well, this is a little bit after that. It's like in the 1870s. But you've had movies over the years where you have characters like Butcher Bill, played by Daniel Day-Lewis, as Johnny said, and you have other movies like Cromwell, which came out in 1970, which is about the Puritan leader Oliver Cromwell. However, he's portrayed by Richard Harris, devout Irish Roman Catholic, and was trained by the Jesuits.
Wait, a Catholic trained by the Jesuits played Cromwell? That's kind of odd. That's weird. Cromwell hated the Jesuits.
Well, yes, and of course, he's portrayed as a complete Cromwell is portrayed as a complete bloodthirsty thug. In that
he's a tyrant? The Jesuits made him evil?
Yes. And of course, all the Puritans are dressed in black and white, and they're always somber. They don't like having fun, and they're just mean to those poor old Catholics. So it's just like.
Well, George, what was that? George, please enlighten the viewer. This was a great example of this. What was that movie Nancy Pelosi's daughter did, all about making evangelicals look evil, but there was no mention of the Catholic Church?
Oh, yes, I had to go look it up, but. One of her daughters, Alexandria, and she has two daughters, Alexandria and Katrina. One of them went to Loyola Marymount, and one went to Georgetown. Speaking of Georgetown, as I mentioned on previous broadcasts, Nancy Pelosi's husband.
The doctor. It was Alexandria Pelosi, the one who went. I think she was the filmmaker. What was the? I just want to get the name of this. Was it Journeys with George? Oh no, that's one of her movies. What was? Friends of God, a road trip with Alexandria Pelosi. That was the movie, and it's all about just making evangelicals look, like crazy people. Yes. They can just kind of twisted, but they had no mention whatsoever of the Catholic Church. I just brought that's the same blueprint with this the Cromwell movie that you brought up.
Well, of course, I mean that's how they always do it. I mean, something that I'll send you the information, but back in 1993, I guess in the summer of 1993, or maybe like May, June 1993, right after Waco. NBC came out with a movie about Waco. So it's like just as soon as the event was over, I mean, the smoke hadn't cleared from the destruction of the compound. So I've seen clips of it.
Oh, well, yeah, this was NBC. This is because have you seen this name Bob Wright, George?
I have not.
This guy, okay, I'll link him in the chat. This is a big Jesuit connection to NBC. He went to College of the Holy Cross. Yeah, College of the Holy Cross, and he went to Catholic Chaminade. At Catholic Chaminade High School is a private Catholic preparatory school, so it's not like a normal, like an elite Catholic prep school. But Bob Wright, Jesuit trained and Catholic educated, he was the NBC executive, served as president and CEO from 1986 to 2001. That covers the Waco time, and he was chairman and CEO from 2001 to 2007. Before he joined NBC, Jesuit-trained Bob Wright was the CEO of General Electric Capital and General Electric Financial Services. from 1983 to 86, and he was vice chairman of General Electric until he retired in 2008. This guy was literally, probably the top dog at NBC for 20 years, and he was educated by the Jesuits. I'll link him in the chat. That's great. So they that shows their culpability in the Waco massacre.
Well, okay, but
covering it up, and just with Waco, like the guy who wrote the Waco report, which led to the invasion, Ronald Noble. He was the head of the ATF at the time. He then became the head of Interpol. Ronald Noble was a knight of St. Gregory the Great, and he wrote the Waco report.
Okay, so this TV movie came out maybe a month or two right after the Waco incident, so it was fairly fresh at the time. If you watch a clip of the movie, you get the impression that David Koresh, Nee Vernon Howe, was a complete psycho. He was a sex fiend. He was delusional. He was paranoid. He was obsessed with death. He was obsessed with murder. And you got the impression that when the initial raid took place, it was the Davidians who opened fired on the ATF. I mean, there's a clip of the movie where the British Davidians are carrying fully automatic weapons, 50 caliber machine guns, bazookas, flamethrowers. So if they actually had that, there would have none of the ATF agents would have survived. So
I bet they probably photoshopped that in. Like, I don't want to. There's no way the Branch Davidians had access to flamethrowers and 50 caliber weapons. Maybe some handguns and like a shotgun. I'm saying there's no way they had access to. If they had access to those guns, the government gave them those guns.
Okay, I was being a little bit.
No other source. Who else has 50 caliber guns? Like, who else has those weapons other than the U.S. Army?
Okay, I was being a little bit facetious, but they had right. Okay, in the TV movie, you have the impression that almost all the Davidians had high caliber weapons, not fully automatic, but if they all had opened up and fired first, almost all of the ATF agents would have been killed. So it was a complete psyop.
Well, that was the way to just because in reality they just like blew up the compound. They were posed no threat to them. It was a way to cover that up. Probably Jesuit probabilism is the way of morality that they rationalize this. But this is how they rationalize them blowing up like the entire compound. Killing the women and children inside. You have to turn them into like a terrorist threat.
So
I think it also partly like dehumanizes them. Say, oh, look at these radicals, like they were just up to no good, like carrying weapons. It's definitely it's insidious propaganda, and all the Louis Freeh was involved in the raid, the head of the FBI. He was Opus Dei, devout Roman Catholic. Louis Freeh, to this day he's involved in the Jeffrey Epstein case, covering up for Alan Dershowitz. And Opus Dei, Louis Freeh was involved in the Penn State scandal in 2011. He was one of the main guys involved with the initial raid in Waco. It can't be a coincidence. And the president at the time, Bill Clinton, was trained by the Jesuits, which is perfect.
Okay, the thing is, I think Bill Clinton is a Catholic. He, in addition to going to Georgetown, he was Jacques de Molay, a Freemason, allegedly a Knight of Malta. He also went to a Catholic primary school in Little Rock. Now, as a teenager, he did attend. As a teenager, he did attend the Southern Baptist Church, and even as an adult. So everybody said, "Oh, Bill Clinton's from Arkansas. He went to the Southern Baptist Church. That must make him a Southern Baptist." Well, there's a picture of him actually when he's in Africa receiving communion from a Catholic priest. It seems odd if he's supposed to be a Protestant.
Well, George, did you see I'll bring this up. Did you see Bill Clinton's remarks to American seminarians at the Vatican?
I believe
I'll link this in the chat. I'll just pull up what he said, because Bill Clinton actually talked about his Catholic education. And he said this at the Vatican on June 2nd, 1994. This was released by the Clinton White House official website. Let me see here. Yeah, so this is just part of it. But Bill Clinton says, for those of you who are American seminarians here, I'd like to say a special word of appreciation for the role of the Catholic Church in our country. There are 20,000 parishes, 9,000 Catholic elementary and high schools, over 200 Catholic colleges and universities, one of which gave me a degree a long time ago. The things I've always revered about the Catholic Church was the sense of constancy and commitment of the Church in our national life. And that's just part of it. And, Bill Clinton always said, I'm amazed so he said he had a vigorous discussion with the Pope about, quote, a large number of things. I'm always amazed to find him so vigorously involved in the affairs of the world. So those are some of actually, he mentions the Jesuit McSorley. He doesn't mention him by name, but he says here, Hillary and I have a friend whom we treasure greatly, who is a Jesuit priest, who I met over 30 years ago, who went to law school with us later and who continues to labor to fulfill his vows.
So are you saying that Bill Clinton...
Sorry, what are you saying?
Are you saying Bill Clinton is about as Catholic as Ronald, or about as Protestant as Ronald Reagan?
Yeah, definitely. He's in the Ronald Reagan, George Bush level of Protestant. Definitely, I'd say he's right in between. I had the three. It's tough to say who is. They were all in reality secret Catholics, but I think Bush was probably most in the open with them. Although Reagan was pretty in the open too. He signed the diplomatic relations. But Bush went to see the Pope 6 times. He set the U.S. record.
And of course, he did that famous interview with Raymond Arroyo on The World Over Live on EWTN. And Arroyo said, well, Mr. President, what do you see when you look into the Pope's eyes? It would have been Benedict the 16th at the time, Ratzinger. And said, well, I see God. So in other words, Bush is saying that God is a Nazi child rape.
Yeah, the Ratzinger was the Hitler Youth. You can see you can really see the photo. Oh, did you hear me good, George?
Yes. Okay. Do you remember the interview that George W. Bush did with Raymond Arroyo on The World Over Live?
Oh yes, actually, I quoted. I have the transcript of that interview in my archive.org feed. And I quoted a bit of it in the preface I did to The Dollar in the Vatican, because in official Catholic doctrine, the Pope is declared as God. Leo the 13th, actually, in his encyclical in 1890, Septime Christianae, says that he has the power of God himself, for instance. But I quoted that passage to show that this ancient belief of the Pope wielding the power of God is still believed to this day by none other than like the President of the United States. Bush. This is Bush. I have this transcript too. I have this entire speech that he gave to the Knights of Columbus convention in 2004 on my archive page. Oh, it looks like George dropped out though. There's me. I gotta get going though, guys. Just I have to go to work soon. But thanks everyone for watching the show today. Peace and love to you all, and we'll see you on the next one.